Good evening, everyone. I know it's 7 o'clock here, but I thought we'd give it a couple more minutes to let more people dial in, since I know we're expecting a full house tonight and are still waiting for it. Hopefully you can actually hear me and my mic's working. And good. All right, I saw a thumbs up. Well, I think we've got a pretty much a full house right now. I think we're waiting on one person, but um, in light of the fact that we have a fairly full agenda this evening, I'd say we get this meeting started and call to order this meeting of the Nederland Board of Trustees at 7:03 p.m. on January 18th, 2022. Macy, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Larson.
Here.
Trustee Taylor.
Here.
Trustee Act.
Here.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Here.
Trustee Danforth.
Here.
Trustee Corvalin.
Here.
Thank you. And please note for the record that Mayor Pro Tem Baumhofer is absent this evening.
Thank you, Macy. We have 4 items on the consent agenda tonight. Any trustees have questions, comments, or a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Make a motion to pass the consent agenda.
I
Do we have
second.
a second? We have a second. Macy.
All right, Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Trustee Act.
Yes.
Mayor Larson.
Yes.
Trustee Danforth.
Yes.
Trustee Corvalin.
Yes.
And Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Consent agenda is thus passed. Moving right ahead into public comment on non-agenda items. Anyone from the public would like to speak on any item not on the agenda tonight? Now is your chance. Please catch our attention and identify yourself and whether you're a town resident or not, and then you can have up to 3 minutes to let us know what you're thinking about.
Ron Mitchell, 3 Jackson Street.
Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. I'd just like to make the announcement that the parking that's under my jurisdiction and control will go to 2-hour parking, just like the towns. Probably only difference between the town and myself is that I will enforce the 2-hour limit. That will start as soon as the signs can be made, and at that time, the parking lot at 100 East First Street will close. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Just for clarification, you mean close, to all parking?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ron. Further public comment? Not seeing or hearing any. We will move into our agenda this evening. We had 2 informational items, but I believe we are postponing the first one due to illness. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We'll do the ADA compliance presentation in February.
Okay, very good. In which case we will go to Macy for our update on the 2022 election.
All right. So we are accepting nomination petitions right now. And as of today, we have 1 submitted and is in the certification process. We encourage the community to submit those nomination petitions by 5 p.m. on Monday, January 24th. And then just a little note, Town Hall is going to start being closed on Mondays and Fridays and being open by appointment only. However, this Monday, the 24th, we will have someone at the office who can notarize and accept nomination petitions.
And I just want to jump in. So it's this Monday as well as this Friday, we realize. So we will have someone present. Office will be open so that anyone can come in. Notary will be on site so we can accept those petitions and notarize them as well. Thanks, Macy. I don't know if there's questions from the board. We just want to keep giving updates.
Absolutely. Does any board members have questions regarding the election? All right. Thank you, Macy. Thank you, Miranda. We will chug right into our one and only scheduled action item this evening. And Miranda, I believe you're introducing this.
Yes. So back when we were doing the budget for 2022, we had talked about funding a co-responder, and the sentiment of the board was that that's a really valuable position, but it's probably better suited to secure a grant for it, and that grant is before us. So we're looking to apply for the Peace Officer Behavioral Health Support and Community Partnership Grant to the tune of about $100,000, which would allow us to do a grant funded position for 1 year. As a reminder, this person would be hired under Boulder County, but would be positioned full-time out of Nederland. So the money we're asking for covers salary plus fringe benefits. The grant does not require a match. However, I am recommending that we apply a $15,000 match, which is basically what we would have in reserves from our staff personnel based on what we anticipate potentially paying the marshal, a sergeant, as well as police officers at the higher end. It leaves us with about $15,000. So I do think we should apply that as a match just to make us a little bit more competitive. Another great thing is that Boulder County co-responders will be applying on our behalf. They're very familiar with this grant, and so they feel really confident that we could potentially get it funded. So really the question before you tonight is, do you approve town staff applying for this grant with Boulder County co-responders? And if so, do you approve that $15,000 match coming from the Ned PD salary budget?
All right. Thank you, Miranda. And yeah, thanks for following up on what, the board thought was a valuable position, but just wasn't able to fund. Trustees, questions for town staff on this. We'll begin with Trustee Taylor.
Yeah, Miranda, I was wondering about the $15,000 that we may have in reserve here. Are we taking into account the salary adjustment that we are planning for mid-year?
Yeah, so that would it be pushing all of our officers up to be at the higher end of their pay scale,
Sure.
which does appear to become somewhat competitive for our community. Also taking into account if we paid the sergeant and marshal at the high ends. We don't typically hire someone at the top. We usually give them that range to move up to. So it does take into consideration all of those components.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Corvallin?
I think it sounds like a pretty good idea. I don't see why we wouldn't want to apply for it. So if there are any negatives to applying for this besides putting up the $15,000, I'd like to hear them.
You know, I don't think there are. I think time and time again, we've seen in Marshall John's report, just the true need for the mental health and that the substance abuse and mental health responder. I think that's the majority of their calls. And so it would be nice to have someone integrated into our police department who could not only go out and respond to them in the moment of crisis, but do all of that really necessary follow-up work that often falls to the wayside when you don't have that kind of case manager to make sure people are connected with the resources that they need. And then there's follow-up to ensure that they keep having that touch base, and it's not kind of a one and done.
Yeah, it sounds perfect. I hope we get it. Thanks for bringing it up.
You, Tanya? Trustee Apt?
I think it's an excellent idea. And reading the police blotter and reports, it seems like a lot of the calls that the Nederland Police and Boulder County Sheriff make involve mental distress. And a lot of times this is the sort of person that's really needed. I do think our police force has done a fantastic job of diffusing those kinds of situations, particularly domestic issues. But I think having professional this type available will be a great benefit to the community as well as the police force. So I'm very supportive.
Okay. Trustee Danforth?
I think this sounds like a no-brainer. We have the funds available to provide that match. I think we absolutely should apply and cross our fingers that we get it.
All right. And Trustee Coombs Ismail?
Yes, I think we should pursue this for sure. Also just want to say that it's great that we have a police department that is interested in pursuing this. And I think that it's coming from an appropriate place in the budget, which is the police department's budget. And I thank them for that as well, because that's where I think they're really putting their money where their mouth is there, not asking for additional funds from the town, but saying this is important. This is having these kinds of responses, this kind of expertise in even unarmed response to crises in the community is important to our PD as well. So I'm glad to see that this is coming from where it's coming from.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement on this one, that it sounds like a good idea, but this is an action item. I would like to open the floor to public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak on what you've heard in this proposed grant application, now would be your chance. I think you know the drill by now, so catch our attention. Not hearing or seeing anyone, so we'll bring this back to the board and see if any trustee would like to make a motion with regards to this grant proposal.
I
move
move
to,
the grant proposal. Sorry.
A second.
Oh, right ahead. I second.
All right, we got 2 motions and 2 seconds that all agree with each other. So I think for the record, I heard, was that Trustee Apt with the motion and Trustee Danforth with a second? Just so
Yep.
Macy has her record
Can
keeping
we-
straight.
Can we just put into the motion if you're approving the $15,000 match, just for clarity's sake?
Trustee Apt, it's your motion.
Yes, so amended.
Okay. All right. Macy, please call the vote on the approving the grant proposal with a $15,000 match.
Trustee Act,
Yes.
trustee Danforth,
Yes.
trustee Kuzma Ismail,
Yes.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
trustee Taylor,
Yes.
and trustee Corvallin.
Yes.
Motion passes. Best of luck. Just out of curiosity, how soon is this something we might hear results on?
They're actually ready to submit the application. We just needed this formal approval. So they're going to submit it this week and we should hear back. Sounds like it's a pretty fast turnaround within 30 days because it's a rolling grant. We should hear back.
Awesome.
We thought there was a deadline, but turns out there's not. It's great.
All right. Great. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Macy. We will move into our long discussion item list for this evening and beginning with the sales tax extension. Miranda.
Yes. So currently the sales tax that supports a community center is set to expire at the end of next year, December 31st, 2023. We'd like an opportunity to go to the voters this April to ask to continue the tax without a sunset. And we actually have Dalton Kelly here from Butler Snow, who is the law firm who is assisting us with this ballot language. And so Dalton, I'd love to invite you to kind of walk the board through the current language that we have before you. This is not for approval. We're really just kind of talking through the ballot language, but Dalton, if you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm Dalton Kelly. I'm with the firm Butler Snow, and we've been working with Miranda and Don so far on putting together this ballot language. And Miranda did a good summary there. So this is a tax increase that was already approved. It was originally approved in 1997, and then it was reauthorized in 2002. And it's currently being used to pay debt service on the bonds that were issued for the community center. And so what the goal of the question is to essentially keep that tax going past 2031, and it would continue going without a sunset. And the purposes would be community service related. So keeping the purposes pretty much the same, just broadening it up a little bit in case in the future you wanted to do a renovation or something with the community center. So the language is pretty short. Hopefully you have it in front of you, but I'll just run through it real quick just so, and then we can dive into the language if there's any suggestions or if you need any clarity. But it is just, without creating any new tax or increasing any tax rates, may the town of Nederland continue to collect the 0.42% sales tax approved by the voters in 1997 and reauthorized in 2002 without expiration for the purposes specified in the 2002 election, including the funding, improvement, renovation, and repair to the community center and the operation and maintenance of the community center and other community center related purposes as approved by the trustees.
Thanks, Dalton. So the question really before the Board of Trustees is how do you feel about this ballot language, and do you want to make any changes? We will then bring this back for formal adoption in a resolution at the next meeting so we can move forward with putting it on the ballot. So tonight we're just looking to tweak the language if you see there's a need to do so.
Thank you, Miranda, and thank you,
question.
Dalton, for joining us. Yeah, somebody's jumping already in with a question. Eric.
Sorry, I'm just wondering why we don't simply enumerate the purposes specified in the 2002 election. I know that when I see something on the ballot that asks me to go research another election, in this case 20 years ago, as a voter, I think that would be very frustrating. It would feel pretty opaque.
Okay, and the purposes pretty much are enumerated right there. So what the 2002 question said was acquisition, renovation, repair, and operation and maintenance of the community center. And so we tried to pull those back in. The one thing, so we need to make sure it's still authorized for the next year to pay your debt service. And so what we could say is that shall it be used for to pay debt service approved at the 2002 election and the funding, improvement, and renovation. There was some concern that people would be confused saying, you know, this was already to pay debt service. But just given that we're reauthorizing it now, we would either have to include to pay debt service or the purposes specified at the 2002 election. So whatever your guidance is on that, we can tweak the language, whatever you think would be better for your voters.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
just for me, not knowing that is probably going to be the kind of standard state of affairs rather than the I don't think it's common that people will realize, oh, they mean debt servicing. So I do feel like it should be clearly stated there, even if it's stated in such a way that suggests that sort of was already approved. So
Okay.
the servicing of that debt. I just feel like this suggests that you have to do some research to know whether or not you support it. And I prefer that people don't have to do that research.
We actually did chat a little bit about that, and so I think we've got some older language. To your point, though, I think we probably do need to tweak it a little bit, just so there isn't confusion that debt is not continuing, because the debt's actually set to be paid off this year, and so it's just that this ballot initiative is coming before the debt is done. So, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
It would be nice if that was just more clearly stated in the language, I think.
Okay, so Trustee Combs, what I've added is, so it now says approved by the voters in 1997 and reauthorized in 2002 without expiration for the purpose of paying debt service on the debt issued pursuant to the 2002 election. If that's clear enough, we could leave it there. We could also put a parenthetical which is set to be paid off this year, if that would be helpful. And then it continues on with the funding the improvement, renovation, and repair of the community center. So that language I still have is the same.
Honestly, I like the addition of the parenthetical too, but I think that how you have it now is adequate in my opinion. I wonder what everyone else thinks.
I agree. I like adding that language, and also adding in the expiration of the debt.
Okay, so you would like to note the current expiration?
Yeah, I think
that
that
parentheses.
Yeah.
there.
Parenthetically.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
People are very sensitive about debts and the town's finances, so I think having that in there is important.
Okay. Okay, so I have in the parenthetical, so I have for the purposes of paying debt service on the debt issued pursuant to the 2002 election, which is scheduled to be paid off this year. And so I just want to be clear, do you want me to add which tax is set to expire on December 1, 2023? Or is just saying which debt is scheduled to be paid off this year sufficient?
I think the debt.
Okay.
Are you saying, Mayor Larson, to list the debt or to say the debt is paid off this year?
I think to say it's going to be paid off this year. I think, being able to say that, and so that, everyone understands that with this ballot language, it's not just retiring that last bit of debt, but also then the sales tax continuation will be for the continued maintenance and upgrades to the community center. And not just paying off what we've already done.
Fair enough.
Trustee Apt, thoughts and comments?
I concur. That sounds like a good language to me. So.
Okay. Trustee Corvallin?
I also think that's a good idea. I mean, it sounds good.
All right. Trustee Taylor?
Trustee Coombs Esmail addressed my one issue, so everything else looks fine to me.
All right. I think it sounds like the board's in pretty good agreement here with that new language and bringing it back. Obviously this is a discussion item this evening. Bring it back as an action item at a next board meeting. But we do take public comment on discussion items as well. So if anyone from the public would like to comment on from the discussion you've heard in the sales tax extension, now would be your opportunity. Catch our attention and have up to 3 minutes. Not seeing or hearing anyone. Bring it back to the board. Miranda, is that all the input you needed from the town board this evening?
Yep, I think we're good. We'll come back next week with the resolution. I
Awesome.
think, Dalton, do you need anything else? Or are you good?
No, and that's we'll come back with the resolution, and so that's just to be clear, the language can still shift if you know, you think of something between now and then. We can always amend it if necessary, but I think we got some good language right here, and we'll have a resolution put together for you.
Magnificent. Thank you very much, Dalton. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Yeah,
and
thank
for
you.
helping us put this language together. All right, moving right along. Second discussion item is the Climate Emergency Action Resolution. And I believe we have members of SAB here this evening to introduce this one. Erica, are you taking this lead on this one, or I'm not sure which of you?
It's going to be Melody and I. So I'm going to share real quickly. We have a quick presentation for you guys.
Right. Hello, everybody. I am
Hey,
Melody.
Melody.
Walker. I'm the co-chair of the Sustainability Advisory Board. Erica Thorley is our secretary. And we got this resolution that the SAB is putting before the board. We hope you guys do see the benefit of it. I believe the text is in your packet, so you should be able to let us know if there's any changes, additions, things like that you'd like to look at. We'll have some time for question answer at the end. Erica, start here.
The judges do not allow these closing items in the courtroom. The temperature of each courtroom.
I think we have an open mic there.
Not sure what that was.
Yep, not sure. Yeah, closed in the courtroom and okay. Yep.
So hello, everyone. My name is Erica Thorley. I'm on the SAB board as secretary, as Melanie mentioned. And we're bringing the climate emergency resolution to the Board of Trustees tonight with a little bit of background. So this resolution was initially started with the IPCC report of last August. And for those of you that are familiar with this, is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the sixth assessment was released in August. And it was very obvious that the actions that have been done thus far to mitigate climate change have not been strong enough. And that was enough for a few of us on the SAB board to start talking about this resolution. Garrett McDaniel, our previous sustainability coordinator, did write this resolution, and then we've had it approved by or voted on to move forward to you guys by the SAB board recently. The big motivation of this climate emergency resolution is to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And you'll see in the resolution, the language is very clear as far as the implications of greater warming than that, right? We're about 1 degree Celsius at this point.
So as I'm sure you're all aware, climate change is something that we're feeling here, even locally, most notably the Marshall Fire, and just how quickly in a drought and without the normal weather we're used to, things can change and things can fluctuate. And I think it's important to note that beyond just the normal kind of impacts that we think about, there's also these kind of trickle down impacts where you've got higher ozone because of the hotter temperatures, and so that can lead to more asthma attacks, more people in the hospital. And so we're just looking to kind of codify that we want to make drastic changes as a community to really be able to abate some of these effects that we're feeling.
So again, big picture is to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This resolution also helps us leverage for future grant funding, right? So many of you may say, how is this new, right? We've already done a lot of pretty powerful climate resolutions, signing on to the Paris Climate Accord. We all have been champions for that, and we very much appreciate that. This gives it another state of urgency. So as we move forward for grant funding, whether that's for climate mitigation or that's for resiliency within our community, this will help us leverage that. It also helps prioritize climate change. We all know it's real, but again, that IPCC report was very daunting as far as what has been done and what needs to be done. We need to act now and we need to act big. It also can build partnerships. There's a number of communities within Colorado and nationwide that have already declared climate emergencies. Polis has seen some requests to declare a statewide climate emergency. That again helps us leverage with that conversation. That would all help us all kind of build our resiliency to the unavoidable impact.
So with that, we bring this resolution before you because we just really want to memorialize kind of these impacts that are happening to our community. And again, rededicate ourselves as a community to move forward in solidarity with all sorts of other communities that are looking to change as well. So we'll open it up for any questions, discussion that you'd like to have.
Well, Melody and Erica, thank you for bringing this to us. You know, building on the work we did when we signed the Paris Climate Accords back in whatever it was 2017 as a town. Really appreciate you guys bringing this. I know with the Marshall fires a couple weeks ago, even when we had President Biden visit Marshall and Superior and Louisville, I think he was the only one to reference this being an emergency and a crisis. Even our local political leaders weren't willing to go that far. So I think it's great that we can try and push them in that direction. I thank you for bringing this to us. Trustees have questions or comments for SAB. We'll begin with Trustee Apt.
I think this is an excellent idea, and I think it's something that can't get enough attention because it really is an emergency. And I think the thing I'd like to see to go with it would be suggestions for individual actions that people can take, and some of those were listed in the last slide that you had. And so I think one thing that is going to be happening is something called Sustainable Sunday, where the town's going to be sending out messages about sustainable things and things that we all can do individually and as a community. So I think defining the problem, conveying the urgency, and we can see locally the kind of effects that are already taking place. Colorado has some of the highest temperature increases in the United States. And we just had, as you know, the warmest 6-month period in state history, which is directly impacting our water supply and our recreational opportunities, which has a direct impact on our economy. So it's all interrelated, and I really appreciate SAB bringing this forward, and thank you, and I'm very supportive.
Trustee Taylor?
Okay, so everyone's going to laugh at me for this, so just prepare to do that. I have a comment about the introduction of the AIM, and it is simply this: lasers are not focused. There's no aspect that relates to focus on a laser. What's very important is that lasers are coherent. So if we were to be coherent like a laser, I would have no complaint whatsoever. But I'm just saying, Bill Clinton was wrong. Lasers are not focused. So, all right, that's all. Now, okay, everybody snickered, so we're all done. Fine. Regarding the fifth whereas, I think there's in a couple of these, there's the string climate change preceding what looks like is the real whereas. There's the word climate change that kind of dropped in there somewhere. It doesn't seem to be actually part of the meaningful whereas statement. And is there a way, Macy or Miranda, that we could bring up the resolution so we could all see it? I mean, it may have been edited since I last looked at it.
I can share it quickly.
Thank you.
Got it
Yes.
pulled up. Yeah.
Because I remember the second time I looked at it, whereas number 5 looked like it had been fixed, and whereas number 6 looked like it still had its. So there it says, climate change, the global economy's overshoot of ecological limits. It looks to me like climate change isn't supposed to be there. Or is it there and I'm misunderstanding the sentence? Looks like it should say, whereas the global economy's overshoot of ecological limits are driving. Does that look like a better phrasing of
Yes, it-
that? Okay.
I
Trustee
agree with
Taylor,
that.
can I just make a quick comment about that comment that you just
Sure,
made?
please.
Which is that I think that there are a number of editorial changes that I would absolutely be happy to help make in this resolution. And Trustee Taylor is picking up on a few of them, I think, here. And you know, my editor's fingers are itching to get my hands on the doc and to start making those changes.
Okay, so we think we're just going to go and we're just going to modify those separately from this meeting.
I would think that, you know, based on your comments, Julian, and jump ahead here to Eric as the next guy I was going to call on. I would think, given that you guys have some edits, you want to do this, I would say let's propose that you guys can send those
just send
edits
them
to
in?
town, and we'll bring this
Okay.
back as an action item at our next meeting. I know we thought
Okay,
about
good then.
putting it forward, but
That's a whole bunch of stuff going away. I was going to make a comment that wasn't strictly editorial. And it was, this probably deserves a little discussion. The whereas number, well, let me see which one it was. It's the whereas that talks about the mass extinction. Oh, thank you very much. That's much easier to read. Oh, yeah, okay. The one that talks about the mass extinction. Where is that now? I
that
think
one
it's
right there
whereas-
with the red highlight or the yellow highlight.
Yeah, the same. It's the fifth whereas.
It's that fifth one.
Okay, right. So when I'm looking for this, I see this as headlines, but if I look at the actual studies, like the Finnegan study or the Urban study, those are fairly statistical studies, and they're valid, they were well designed, but I feel uncomfortable saying that the global economy's overshoot of ecological limits are driving a 6th mass extinction. I would feel much more comfortable if we were to have a phrase like, competent research indicates that, rather than stating this as if it's a fact. Right now, it's a hypothesis that's well supported. All of that's very good, but I think it should be stated in that way for that particular one. All the other stuff seems to be fairly straightforward, factual data that isn't subject to questioning or adjustment. This one is the one where I was thinking, it'd be nice to say, oh, climate change and the global economy is over. Oh, okay, I guess I can see those. Well, never mind. We'll deal with the editorial issues later. But I just wanted to say that one finding about ecological limits driving a 6th mass extinction, I'd like to qualify that by saying there's research that indicates that. It's still valid, just to be clearer on that. And the other was the reference to just transition, which is largely a trades union movement. I'm wondering if that's the best thing we could pick as support for this. That seems to me to be a movement that is more about assuring that trade union members remain gainfully employed during industry's transition from dirty to clean energy. And that doesn't seem to be that. Anyway, I was just looking at that and thinking there's just a slight disconnect between that particular movement and the future whereases. It doesn't seem to lead directly to the future whereases. But I just wanted to kind of bring that to your attention, and everything else looks fine except for editorial issues like commas, and I'll drop you a note about that.
Yeah, Yeah, so just quickly, I'll note on that editorial stuff that this was a resolution that was passed by, I think it was Boulder County and some other places that Garrett was looking at. So I think in the copying over, some words and commas just got lost. So we can pull
Yeah,
those
and
back in from the original.
yeah, there's no
So-
doubt in my mind we'll remain consistent with their resolution, but just a few minor issues I'm thinking about.
Thank you, Julian. Eric, did you have some other comments about this?
I did, and beyond the some of the editorial things, which, like I said, I'd be absolutely, it would be a pleasure for me to help with if that is desired, because it is something I can be quite picky about, but especially when it comes to resolutions that I'm sort of committing the town to. But that leads to the next sort of part of this, which is that this resolution is very much a set of whereas statements, where I think that there is some scope to use the resolution to set up some legislative priorities for the town in broad strokes, right? Not saying any specific legislation that should be called out here, but the be it resolved section, right? The actual resolution part of this resolution has no resolution in it, right? Only that we resolve that these whereas statements are true. I don't think that we need to stop there. I think we could have at least one more section to this resolution that defines in broad terms some legislative priorities for the town that are in alignment with those whereas statements, which I believe is, in fact, the purpose of that structure, right? And so I recognize that other municipalities may have done it like this, but I do think we can do it maybe a little bit more strongly. And I think not commit the town to specific legislative goals, but rather in broad strokes outline what legislative priorities the town should have in addressing the climate emergency that has been articulated here. In particular, whereas Nederland can act as a leader by joining the calls for local, state, et cetera, that's not a whereas statement for me. That actually belongs in the resolution, right? That Nederland is resolved to be a leader in et cetera, right? And so I think that we might kind of tweak the structure of it a bit, bring some of those sentiments from the whereas clauses into the actual resolution itself, and in broad strokes outline our legislative priorities vis-a-vis the climate emergency.
I like that idea. I think being more action oriented is a good idea. And I think we've already accomplished some things, and we could say that we continue to want to achieve 100% renewable energy, for example, by 2025, zero waste, et cetera, existing goals, and just reaffirm those goals that are climate related. The other thing that we could mention is our participation in Colorado Communities for Climate Action and their legislative efforts, which are, fairly well aligned with ours. So I don't know if we want to mention our participation with them, our continued participation. I think there were at last count, there were at least 34 other Colorado communities who are involved with CC4CA. And they have a lot of good initiatives to try to reduce greenhouse gases and lobby for immediate and continued regulation of emissions of things like methane, as well as emissions from transportation. So I agree with Eric. I think there are things we can do to add some action items and reinforce the goals we've already passed.
And in regards to the just transition issue, sorry, I forgot to mention that we could define what a just transition is for Nederland, which I would say, broadly speaking, to me at least, would be to enact laws and ordinances that go some way to addressing this climate emergency without leaving the poor and working classes behind, right? Which is essentially what the just transition movement is about. I wouldn't necessarily want to subscribe to the European Union's particular version of a just transition, because it has very specific kind of legislative goals for that body in that particular context in that place, which is not here in Nederland, right? So we could define it more broadly and then say we are committed to that in the resolution section.
Thank you, Eric. Trustee Corvallin?
There I am. Yeah, I agree with what Julian and Eric were talking about, the editing and the verbiage doesn't flow and doesn't always, it seems like a little bit superfluous, but I think good editing will take care of that. And yeah, that's when Eric said, let's put some sort of like action emphasis on this. That's when I was reading it, I was like, at the end, I'm like, okay, whereas, and then it's like, and so this is just to bring awareness. It's like, can we do more? Can we have something with, like that Alan was saying, that highlight our goals and come up with a strategy for making that happen. If 2025 we're going to be 100% renewable, that's only 3 years away, and where are we with that? So I like the idea of it, but I'm also just kind of like, if it's just a bunch of words, it of course I'll pass it, but it's not going to do anything, So that's my opinion on that. Otherwise, I think it's a great idea. And so this was somebody else's resolution that you guys just kind of pieced together from Boulder, or where did it come from? Oh,
So I believe that Garrett took Boulder County's and some other communities' climate emergency resolutions and kind of merged them together to create a Nederland one. So I'm not sure it's strictly from any one community, but I think Boulder County is majority source.
yeah, I'd like to see it get a little more specific to our area. It is with the fires and all that, but I think the editors who have volunteered to do it will probably figure that out, a way to make it seem a little less broad and a little more localized. But yeah, sounds great.
Thanks, Tanya. And Trustee Danforth.
One of the benefits of going last year is that I agree with everything that the trustees before me have said. I think that having some of those edits will be important, I think, grammatically, and also having some action items are important to us as well. So I look forward to seeing this coming back as an action item.
Agreed. I really appreciate it. I think, all the points have been brought up. I really like the idea of moving those last two whereases into the sections. Give us some focus. And, I would certainly want to call out too our goal, though, the oft-mentioned goal of 100%. I know you guys, I stuck you guys with that one years ago and pushed ahead on that. And we've kind of fallen behind in great part because, our focus went to COVID. But I still have hopes that we can really make a push on that in the next 3 years. And so I think calling that out as a specific goal remains beneficial to the town. So I think, we certainly have 2 editors lined up to help you guys. You've heard comments from the town board about some edits and some modifications, but let's also hear if anyone from the public would like to comment on the the climate emergency resolution. Now would be your chance. Catch our attention, and I have up to 3 minutes. Karen Blakemore, I see a hand up.
Yeah, that's me.
Yep, welcome.
Hi. So when we worked on the vision plan for environmental sustainability 2030, one of the things that we had under the climate goal was a climate action plan. And so I don't know if SAB has worked on that at all in the past, or if it's something that you're planning to do in the future. But I think that might address the action part of this resolution. That's it.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think that might be good input for the editors as a possible new section and goal. Other public comment?
Am I on?
I hear yes. We have a call-in user.
Kathleen Chipeye, 30-year East Mag resident, 18-year business owner. I appreciate the effort. I don't think this is necessary, and it's especially not necessary because Biden arrived and declared an emergency in Boulder because of the fires. But I just think resolutions don't do a thing for the community, and I don't think this was copied from anywhere because of all the typos and sentences don't flow. And so I think we can live without this resolution and appreciate the effort, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the public with comments? Not seeing or hearing any. This is just discussion item this evening. So I think Eric, Julian, kind of you guys sound like you volunteered to help rework some of these whereases and add a little more meat to a resolution, which can come back before this board in the next meeting. Erica, Melody, and the rest of SAB, thank you guys for doing the legwork on this and bringing it before us, and look forward to hearing from you guys again in early February. All right, moving right along, Revitalizing Main Streets grant. And Miranda, you're gonna let us know about this one.
Yep. So Chris Pelletier had applied for this grant in May. Unfortunately, we weren't selected to move forward, but we have been invited to reapply. So as a reminder, this grant was focusing on First Street. The plan was to reconstruct the sidewalks on the north side and do some upgrades to the sidewalk, plus a loading zone on the south side. It also involved burying power lines. In our research with Excel on both the TIPS project and this project, we've determined that it's incredibly expensive to bury power lines. Chris had originally applied for this grant at the tune of $2 million, and it is possible that that $2 million wasn't even going to touch the cost of fully burying all the power lines. So while that's ideal and wonderful, I think we do need to, in order to be competitive, scale this grant back a bit to just the tune of about $900,000. And in doing so, we would remove that burying power line. And we don't really have time to reinvent this grant. I do think there is benefit in submitting it in its current format, with the possible exception, though. Some DDA members reached out and reminded me that the loading zone wasn't very popular. And so perhaps we remove the loading zone and just look at redoing and upgrading that sidewalk. We did go ahead and kind of call a special DDA meeting for Thursday to maybe talk through that. But long story short, what I'm looking to do is apply for this grant again, remove that burying power lines, possibly remove the loading zone, and really just focus on sidewalk upgrades to make it so people don't have to walk down the middle of First Street. They actually have usable sidewalks that are also allow us to be ADA compliant. So the question before you is, do you support us applying for this grant? I'm also looking to do a match. Although a match isn't required, the DDA had previously agreed to a 10% match, and that was back when it was $2 million. So I would like to still ask the DDA for a 10% match at the tune of $90,000, just to make us competitive. So I'm also asking for approval from the board to direct us to go ahead and, in that special meeting on Thursday, ask for that match.
Thank you, Miranda. Just out of curiosity, is there a reason why we're saying, the DDA previously said sure to a $200,000, basically a match, that 10%? Is there any reason or any benefit to asking him to maintain the 200,000 so we go to a 20% match instead of a 10%? Does that make us significantly more competitive?
Yeah, it absolutely makes us more competitive. I know they didn't roll it into their 2022 budget though, because we weren't awarded. And so I do think that's a pretty heavy ask, and no, that's not in their current budget.
Okay, that was basically what my question was. All right, trustees, Trustee Corvallin, we'll start with you this time on thoughts and comments or questions.
So is this basically the same plan, or what's different?
Yeah, it would be the same plan. The difference is definitely no burying power lines. And then I would like feedback from the DDA on whether we maybe scrap the loading zone and just focus purely on upgrading the sidewalks on both the north and south side of First Street.
Yeah, sure, that sounds good. It's a good start.
Okay, Trustee Danforth.
I am in support of this, and I personally think we could scrap the loading zone and focus on the sidewalks. I mean, as somebody who spends a lot of time frequenting our shops in town, it is hard to walk from one side to the other without having to go up and down and on dirt. And then, you know, particularly there's one spot where the so-called sidewalk, or I would say more of a trail, is very narrow, and it's just not conducive to having people move through our town and to our businesses. So I think focusing on sidewalks on the north and south side should be a priority.
Great.
The
And one
loading
thing
to me is short.
Okay. I don't think I added in here. So the grant's actually not due until the 4th. So the plan is to do kind of a quick connection with the DDA and actually bring this back for formal approval at your meeting on the 1st. And so my gut is probably kind of telling me that the loading zone maybe is not the current need and we could revisit that later. And that this grant is really a lot about sidewalk and that the mobility of sidewalks and the making sure that they flow well and they're ADA accessible. I think that if we scaled it back to focus on just that, we probably have a really competitive grant before them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely important to our town and to having, you know, visitors be able to access our businesses and do so in a safe way rather than so many people having to walk down the street and sometimes being forced there because of people parking on areas that should be sidewalks. You know, I think absolutely 100% we need to.
Sure, we just lost Lindsay with the internet connection, or
I thought it was me. I was about to send a message.
Trickled off at the end, but I think it sounded like I think we got most of the comment there.
Yes.
Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yeah, I guess, you know, off the top in my brain, I can't picture the map of what exactly it is, which areas we're exactly addressing. It'd be nice to see a visual representation of exactly what we're planning on addressing here, especially with this extremely tight turnaround. I know that it did say in the document, unless I misread, that this grant was opened in March of last year, but we're only now considering applying for it. Is that correct?
No, we applied in May of 2021. So what's in the packet is the original applications Chris submitted. So we applied in May 2021. We were not accepted, but Chris and I just received an email inviting us to resubmit this. And we actually didn't need to modify it, but Chris and I felt it was probably best to scale it back. So we do want to resubmit the same application, just without the bearing of the power lines and possibly removing that loading zone.
Understood. And so it is both sides of First Street.
Correct. And I can bring a visual representation when we bring it back on the 1st to make sure everyone's clear.
Yeah. So it's both sides of First Street. How far down are we talking?
Really just kind of down, not to Snyder. I mean, the plan is to try to extend down to Snyder and then make that connection to 2nd Street off of Snyder.
So it would actually go on Snyder as well, this sidewalk that's being proposed, but only on one side of Snyder.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just want to all out in the open here, what exactly we're talking about.
Yes, I don't think Snyder is definitely not large enough to do it on both sides.
Right. And so this proposal does not lose any parking?
No.
Okay.
It would just be to update the sidewalks.
Even with the loading zone, or would the loading
Yes.
zone eliminate parking?
Although there really isn't kind of true designated parking on the south side of First Street. So the loading zone would be an actual space that doesn't really exist currently. People just kind of park there and unload their trucks. The possibility, we probably don't have enough time to do this, but if we just focus on the sidewalks, I think under that parking in the CBD discussion, we could maybe look at like parallel parking there or some sort of alternative. If we remove the loading zone, that actually would allow us to maybe focus more on parking and less on that loading business piece.
Yeah, I think that given the, I wouldn't say general opposition, but general concern about the loading zone proposal, especially among members of the DDA last time around, that it does make sense to focus on sidewalks. It does make sense to maybe preserve the ability to parallel park on the south side of First Street along that sidewalk, if that is indeed possible, and to really focus on having genuine ADA accessible spaces and a First Street that's walkable and that people don't have to walk down the middle of the street in order to get from store to store. Especially coupling along with this conversation about a climate emergency, having a walkable town goes a long way to making an environmentally sustainable town. And we are a long way from that. So I think this is something that, despite my kind of reservations regarding the turnaround time on this, which I do think, again, we do need more turnaround time on things like this. They do need to go through our other advisory boards. We just, at some point here, are going to need to draw a line on this in the sand on these fast turnaround time grants. But in this case, I think that our comprehensive plan agrees and we should pursue it.
Thank you, Eric. Trustee Taylor.
Yeah, I agree with the priorities on this. I would just like to make sure, since the loading zone seems like something that would be useful, I'd like to make sure that the DDA is certain that the objections aren't to the type of loading zone as opposed to the notion of a loading zone. It would be nice to know that this has been discussed with the retailers who object to the loading zone, and that we know it's just any loading zone at all is objectionable and not that type of loading zone. So if we make some adjustments and tweaks, maybe it would be acceptable. Loading zone seems like a good idea to me, but again, if the retailers are saying that it's not going to help them, then yeah, loading zone can go.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, Chris has the letters of support in here. And I know he did a lot of work with different business owners. I know it is a tight turnaround, but I do think there's value in, if we're approved to move forward, especially after talking to the DDA, taking next week to reach out to them, just to make sure they are aware, of course, that we're reapplying and what the adjusted application, loading or no loading zone, what that looks like, just to make sure that they feel that they're heard and that we are adequately representing their needs and their interests when it comes to that developing that area.
Yeah, and I think the issue of the fast turnaround is something we're striving to address by dedicating someone to the process of locating these grants in a timely fashion. So hopefully, this will be a more rare occasion.
Yeah, we actually we're not considering reapplying until Chris received an email where we were encouraged to do so. So that felt like a good sign that maybe we're likely to apply. But unfortunately, we did just receive that email.
Well, there would be a problem if we had never reviewed this before. But I remember the review of this. And so, yeah, it's reasonably fresh in my mind, even though I'm old. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jillian. Trustee Apt?
I'm definitely supportive, and I think that if you are in a wheelchair, this area would be a real nightmare, and it's a challenge if you're just on 2 feet. And I did have people, retailers along there, lobbying me when they saw me saying lose the loading zone. So that was something I did hear. People just buttonholing me and saying, they were very opposed to the loading zone. So I think that's a good idea to lose that and retain a sidewalk, walkable environment emphasis with some, decorative amenities perhaps. But I think Chris did a good job of making an attempt the first time.
Yeah, I agree with everything my board members have said before this. Really look forward to hearing outcome of the DDA meeting and hearing what their discussion is, and if they have some more ideas or adjustments to it before it comes back to us in February. I would also like to hear if there's any public who would like to speak on this right now. Now would be your chance. Catch our attention in some way and let us know what you're thinking.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello?
can.
Kathleen
Go ahead.
Chipai, business owner on First Street for 18 years, East Magnolia resident, 30 years. Yeah, when this grant first came up last year, again, it was not vetted whatsoever to the business community. And then the design plan was put out to put a loading zone in the middle of First Street, which all the business owners agreed would not be helpful because of the 2 to 3 days of the week, there would be semi-trucks parked in the middle of our central business district, exhausting into our customers who would be walking on the sidewalk or the street. So no one was for the loading zone whatsoever. And again, I'm going to wish that people had been contacted prior so we could find out what the business owners on First Street actually wanted. I am for repairing the sidewalks and have requested it for the last decade because they're not ADA compliant. And I've been on First Street for 18 years watching people have serious troubles, and I'm impressed that no one sued the town at this point. So I'm definitely for that. I think I'm glad someone called ahead to find out that how much it would cost to bury the lines, because I didn't think that had been properly vetted the first time around, and clearly it hasn't from what Miranda just said today. So I'm going to go once again and say better communication with the parties involved that are normally called stakeholders, and that would be the businesses on First Street. And I can safely say that there was not a single business owner that said they were in support of the loading zone to be in the middle of First Street or any different than where they currently use, which is on First Street, but not in front of any buildings. And I would love to see the staircase set of steps on my side of the street turned into something usable for people with canes, wheelchairs, and problems walking. And because basically right now the roadway is used more than the sidewalks, and that's really disturbing. So I support it, but once again, lacking communication in advance and just ignoring the stakeholders involved. And I'm kind of sick of that. Thank you.
Any other members of the public like to speak on this? Karen Blakemore, I think your hand has been raised since the last comment. I just don't want to ignore it if this is okay.
I have a comment.
Ron Mitchell, please.
Karen, if you're going to do improvements on the north side, I think you ought to consider the traffic pattern and make some changes there also. It'd be a good opportunity. And back in the vehicles and have them at a 90-degree angle to where they're backing in now, because people, where the way it works right now, often have near misses and have a potential to bump into people. And if you had people backing in and they were facing southeast, they would have much better, much safer egress when they leave. And I think that would be the ideal time to consider doing something like that.
Thank you, Ron. Any other members of the public? Not seeing or hearing anyone else. I'll bring this back to the board. Board members, do you have any further comments or thoughts to Miranda before she takes this to the DDA and we see it again in a few weeks' time? 2 weeks' time?
I
Miranda,
suppose
do you?
only just to remind town staff that some consistency between these various sidewalk projects is very much, I think, desired from what I've heard, at least from this board. So in terms of materials used, you know, and whether we're using pavers or whether we're pouring concrete or whatever it might be, that we remain consistent and that we continue trying to build a town that is coherent and that actually fits together.
Agreed. And actually, to that point, we did connect with CDOT because they're looking to do some work here, hopefully in the next couple of years in the roundabout, and just making sure their project meshes with our project. So completely agree with you on that one.
Could we say coherent like a laser?
Yes.
Did you get everything you need from us, Miranda?
I did, yeah. So we will, and anyone's welcome to join. We'll publicly notice that a special DDA meeting. It's just a quick hour where we'll be reviewing this, and we're also going to go over the CBD parking survey with them. So it'll be a night of central business infrastructure development night. So you're welcome to join us for that. WebEx at 6 o'clock, but I'll get that publicly noticed today.
On Thursday, right?
Yes, thank you, Thursday.
All right.
Sounds like a hoot and a holler.
Right, it's gonna be so fun. Everyone should come.
All right. Well, we are moving along. Next item up is discussion item 7.4, which is this annexation regulations. And I just want to give a little background on this. You know, as everyone knows, the town is currently under IGA with Boulder County. That IGA expires in March of 22. In just a couple months, and there's been discussion amongst the board. Well, not only years ago when we spent 18 months discussing with the county extent or how to modify, or should we want to modify the IGA? Because I think back then, and I would hazard to say now, the members of the Nederland Board of Trustees, in the great majority, if not unanimity, are in agreement that we should have an IGA with the county, and it's just a matter of working out those details. So one of the things we've been looking at is the knowledge that we are up against a wall on the current IGA. There is not time to renegotiate or modify the IGA before March. And so the board has been looking at keeping our options open by exploring several options that continue to give us the benefits of the IGA, but also provide the impetus for the town and the county to continue to work together. And so one of the things that came out of a recent work session was the idea of looking at adopting annexation regulations here in the town. Essentially, some of the ideas we kicked around in the previous IGA renegotiation as an option or an alternative to extending the current IGA for some period of time. And we've kicked around different numbers at a time. The board hasn't made any decisions, not making decisions tonight. I think it's, clearly at some point in the next few months, well, 2 months, really, month and a half, really, this board will be, time is a frighteningly fast flyer these days. This board will be having an action item to determine and take a vote on whether to extend the current IGA or to let that IGA expire, potentially with additional regulations to maintain some of the aspects of the IGA that we see most important. And those we're discussing tonight are these annexation regulations. And so that's what we're looking at here tonight, is one possible, just a discussion about one of these possible options to keep our opportunities or our board's option, our town's options, as open as possible in the coming 2 months as we finish as this board finishes its time and leads to the additional discussions. And so, Miranda, I think you might have had a few more things to add to that. Or is it Jennifer Madsen that's going to?
Yeah, sorry,
I'm
it's
sorry.
Jennifer who's
Yep.
gonna jump in on this one, but
I was looking at the wrong line of my notes. It's Jennifer.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, trustees. In the packet before you on the annexation issue, what you have is some examples of potential regulations that could be adopted by the town. And just as a matter of background, these annexation regulations that would be adopted by the town would be in addition to all of the requirements which are in state law. So some of the examples would be expanding application requirements, requirements for maps, setting an expectation for a pre-application conference with the petitioners so that town staff could get an idea of what the proposal, annexation proposal would be. Require a planning commission review. Also requiring annexation agreements. One of the regulations has a step for asking the petitioner to go through community and neighborhood meetings during the process and then setting out the outcome of those meetings in the petition. The Lions regulation requires a concept plan. And another idea from Lions is that certain annexations must be approved by a town vote. So these are examples, and they're by no means a limit on what you can do. But these are some ideas to start the conversation. So I'll open that up for any questions that anybody has.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Trustee Taylor, any questions for town staff on this?
No, I thought it was very informative reading over the various approaches here. It is kind of interesting how many rumors are going around that this BOT is desperate to start annexing things, when one of the key things we're doing here is saying, let's make this a very disciplined process so that if we have a plan to annex, and we don't right now, if we had a plan to annex, we would be able to assure that the public was involved for anything that was large, and that we have a very disciplined process. Again, the IGA says here are a bunch of limits, but the IGA doesn't present a precise process that we would be able to use. And so I think this is a very good idea to start planning out a process for annexation if we do it. And that should be the framework whereby any annexation would be assessed and either decided for or against. And again, to go beyond the Colorado state rules and to require further discipline and a vote of the people, I think this could lead to a very good and useful set of ordinances. And so I'm going to look this over, and I will have to take some notes on what I think are priorities here. And I guess all of the BOT is going to be doing that, and hopefully come back with some good feedback.
Thank you, Julian. Trustee Apt?
Yes, I'd like to thank Jennifer for providing those other towns annexation agreements. I found it to be very interesting reading. And, you know, I think that clearly a lot of people in town, as Julian said, are concerned that there's some desire for rapid annexations, which is certainly not the case on this BOT, nor was it on the last. I do think that there's a strong sentiment to do good planning, consider the comprehensive plan, consider the envision document, and embody anything that comes from that previous citizen feedback in anything that we do. The things that jumped out at me that were common among these agreements, as Jennifer said, you know, lots of details would be needed to be supplied by the people proposing to be annexed. And then one thing that every agreement said loud and clear is existing residents do not pay for the cost of the annexation. And I think that's a really important thing to consider. And that the other towns and counties that I've been involved with, Larimer County and Fort Collins in particular, was on the planning commission for the county and the planning and zoning board and city council for Fort Collins, was, deciding who pays and who benefits. And we would want to be sure that we would charge the developer appropriately for their fair share of any cost for extending utilities and road improvements that would be triggered by an annexation. And as we have said previously, and was embodied in these other towns' agreements, every one, that beyond a certain threshold, and it varied from town to town, a vote of the vote of the residents or the taxpayers would be required to approve it. And I think we in our previous discussions in the previous board and some in this board said more than a unit or two, more than a house or two or three, or maybe it's an acre. If anything major would go to a vote of the residents. And that I think Mayor Pro Tem Jonathan Baumhover, in the last conversation we had, said that, if there was an election, it would go to the next appropriate date, which would be in April, and that the cost of the election would be borne by the developer. And then I also think it's important that there be some enclave procedures, which were detailed. Someone is surrounded by the town. It's a small number of units or maybe one house, and they want to come in. What's the procedure? And maybe that becomes the only instance where it's fast tracked. But I do think it's important that the developer or proposer would pay for mailing notifications to people at least within at least a mile of the development. People throw around 200 feet or 300 feet or 500 feet. That's woefully inadequate. When you start talking about major annexations, it has an impact far beyond 300 feet. And I do think we want to notify everybody of what is being proposed and be generous about that area of notification. So those are the things that I found very informative and very interesting, and I think would probably be in step with what the town and the board might want to do when we start developing or producing our own annexation policies that could be embodied in an IGA. We've all concurred that we don't want the county to make the decision. We want to be able to make this either jointly or with or by the town and by the residents, not just the BOT generally. So I think that those are the things that I came away from this and previous discussions and concerns of residents. So very useful pieces of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Trustee Corvallin?
All right. I'm
Yep.
having some connectivity problems. You guys hear me?
We can.
All right, that's good. So, I guess right now we're just throwing things around, things that are important to us. Is that kind of what this is initially about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I cut out for about 2 minutes. Well, there's the two main things, obviously, is it any sort of annexation, I think more than 2 houses. And I mean, these are the details that are going to take a while to really hash out. Is it 2 houses? Is it 3 houses? When does it need to go up for a vote? That I think definitely the town has to vote, but I don't know if it's already been mentioned, but the radius of a development that's getting annexed, the neighbors near it most likely are not part of town, and so they would technically not be allowed to vote. But I feel very strongly that the people that should be voting the most are the people most likely to be affected, which would be people within a certain radius of the development, including behind it, front of it, the traffic flow that they were going to have to deal with, the lights, the noise. In what was once a dark, quiet area becomes a neighborhood. They may not be in town, but they need a voice. So that is something that needs to be determined, how far that radius extends. Probably, again, some sort of formula dealing with how many units or how big the development is. That to me is super duper important. I also think with any development that wants to be annexed, even if it's just one, that the town needs to make sure that the infrastructure is prepared for any additional units. That includes the emergency services, the sewer, the water, the roads, road crew, road access, traffic studies. All that needs to come out of the expense of the person who wishes to be annexed. Certainly, town's not paying for a traffic study. And for larger developments, where very likely the town doesn't have the water or sewage capacity to handle it, of course, the developer would have to pay that cost 100%. And I also think if traffic studies determine that a turning lane is required to enter this subdivision, or another lane, or any amount of stuff, I think that all of that needs to be accounted for before, one bulldozer comes in and starts building. That's to me, to build before the infrastructure is prepared for it, and to then burden the town and the neighbors with a development, that's just not a good idea. So those are things that to me are really super duper important. And that's really all I can think of at the moment. So we can move on.
Thank you, Tanya. Lindsay?
Yeah, I do think it's kind of funny, the number of people who think that the current BOT is pro-annexation or out to do a land grab of sorts. I don't know where these rumors are coming from, but as our entire board has made pretty clear, is that we actually are trying to have our citizens have more of a voice and more control over annexations. And so I hope that that's clear to anybody on the line, that we are absolutely trying to give people a voice and make sure that if anybody comes before the town with a petition to be annexed, that it's going to go through a rigorous review process. And if it's a large one, that hopefully we'll be able to give our citizens a voice. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. So in terms of some of the exact policies that I'm in favor of, I think for large developments, giving our residents a voice, having a certain size trigger an election, and having that election cost borne by the developer. I think that's something that's very important to me. Also, not passing along costs to our residents, as Alan had pointed out, that if bringing on an annexation, if it increases costs for our other residents, that's not going to be acceptable. The other thing that I'm kind of interested in understanding is the water and sewer. I don't know if it's a current requirement or not, because if a single parcel, say, that abuts town, if they want to join and they are not currently on our water and sewer, are we requiring them to be on our water and sewer in order to be included in town? Does anybody know?
The way it's
I would
written,
think-
the way in which the current code reads is that any new development would need to tie into town utilities. So kind of like what recently came before you was a variance to do so, but I guess that would be something for the Board of Trustees to consider in this process, is whether they need to pay to extend utility lines, because in many of these areas they would have to do so, couldn't just connect in easily, or if they could get a variance.
Yeah,
So
far enough away from the town. I know that the sewer line won't extend that far. So in my neighborhood, we're all on local septic systems, and we have water, but we're on local septic systems. I'm guessing there's probably a rule around that regarding how far away the area is from our sewer system.
I think that's where the variance actually comes into play, is that you need to definitely identify that financial hardship, because the ability to tap in is going to be an extraordinary cost because of the extension of the line needed.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of, is like existing properties, so an existing single-family home. If they petition to be included into town because they want to be included in our elections, or they, just want a voice, whatever the reason is, I don't think having them connect into our water and sewer, a single home, that would need to be a factor, I think, in them being a part of town, especially because I think just 6 months ago that we approved a parcel in the middle of town to not be on sewer. So I think, I don't want to see that being a detriment to anybody trying to join town if they want to be annexed, but if it's a single family existing home, that, we don't force anybody to board, those costs.
I think that's why it would be very important to have the kind of documentation that some of these annexation regulations suggest, something like a concept plan, right? Because then they could propose that they be annexed into town and then be granted a variance for having to hook up to town water and sewer, right? And so I don't think we should eliminate the requirement that you're hooked up to town utilities, but rather we leave it open that there's a possibility that you could have a variance there by petition in the process for annexation.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think especially for small existing homes, new developments, that's a whole different ball game there. But for a small single family home, if they desire to be annexed, I don't want I don't want us to put up roadblocks unnecessarily to anybody. But just kind of my thought on that. And I think that covered all my topics.
Thanks, Lindsay. Eric?
Yeah, so I do think that there should be a process. I think that the town should control that process. I think that we should have a law that outlines that process very clearly. The things that I like in some of these other agreements that I've read are that the costs are borne by the applicant, as many trustees have said. I really like the idea of community and neighborhood meetings that go beyond town residents, that we require every property resident within a certain radius of the property in question that's being considered for annexation to be notified and to participate in well-documented community meetings. I think that's a great idea. Robust and generous notification, I think, is important for even properties beyond that radius. I agree, a streamlined process for enclaves makes a lot of sense that be called out. I think robust documentation should be required in the application process. The Lions one was, I think, quite excellent. The maps, the concept plan, environmental impact studies. I actually think that the firm to do the environmental impact study should be selected by the town. I think that the same for a traffic study. I think the firm should be selected by the town. I think that it should be filed with the county for county evaluation, and the county should be given time to respond to the proposal and to provide feedback on it. And I do think that could potentially make up some part of an IGA that we do finally negotiate with the county, that we kind of clearly outline what their role is in our annexation process. And that is maybe an evaluative role that helps support the town in making good decisions for annexation. I don't see why the county would be against that. Rather than a decision-making role, is just to make that clear, that they're not making a decision, but rather they are evaluating the merits of the proposal and from their perspective. I think that we need to be absolutely certain that the town is able to serve their proposal, and the concept of this plan is hugely important. And the way that that is evaluated, I think, needs to be very clearly spelled out, and it needs to relate directly to the way that our town works. So while some of these other towns' proposals or some of their rules are great, I do think that we need to make it make sense for Nederland on that front. So I think a lot of conversation with Public Works and our utilities departments is going to need to happen to figure out what exactly that looks like. Like, what is an applicant going to have to do to prove that the town can serve, and what kinds of information do our staff need? I do think there should be an annexation agreement for every annexation, even if it is a streamlined one. I think that another part of the IGA that sort of is evolving in my mind here from reading this stuff is that perhaps we could approximate something like a 3-mile plan that is very kind of loose and flexible, yet delineates some kind of clear goals for the town, that the county signs the IGA in essentially to say, yes, we are aware that these are the town's goals and that we're not going to stand in the town's way excessively in order to achieve these. So a sort of 3-mile plan, even though that's no longer required by state statute, I think would be very useful to have that kind of an agreement with the county. I do think we should go to a public vote on major annexation. Sorry, it's a long list here, but I'm just want to get it all out there. And I think lastly, I wanted to bring up the comprehensive plan. One thing I did note was that every one of these annexation regulations from other towns call out their comprehensive plans in no uncertain terms, allowing for no legislative flexibility whatsoever. They simply say must conform to the comprehensive plan, or must address how it conforms to the comprehensive plan. They don't say they must, conform to the comprehensive plan 80% or 70% or in majority. I don't think that kind of language is helpful. And the comprehensive plan is a document that is one of the documents that goes through the most rigorous public process. I think in some ways it's our most democratic document. And in that sense, I think we really need a comprehensive plan that binds the board to it. And I am very skeptical of this notion of legislative flexibility. And I think that it's time that we start working that language more explicitly into our code, so that we are then forced to create a comprehensive plan that is specific enough that it can stand up to that kind of scrutiny. And I do think that there is a small element of cart before horse here happening. I recognize that there's a reality that this expires in March, and that is the reality. But we are extending it, or potentially extending it, right? There is a general agreement, majority agreement among this board, that extending it is something we could absolutely do without, becoming too concerned. And so I think that if we do extend, we are giving ourselves the requisite amount of time to really hash out all of these details on what our annexation policy would be, but we're also giving us more time to finish the envision process, create a comprehensive plan that then marries well with this annexation policy, as well as all the other plans that it needs to marry with. I'm including the parks plan, the trails master plan, the master infrastructure plan. That was updated recently, whereas the comprehensive plan remains out of date, right? So our plans are not in alignment, and I think the comprehensive plan should be the main one that we are referencing, and all other plans should flow from that. And our annexation agreement should be grounded firmly in the goals set forth in our comprehensive plan. And so I really think we need to do that in order to be doing this in a responsible way. And I recognize that this has been a long process for people, so some folks on this board, and that you've gone through all of this before, and you've gone through public input before, and there's so much history behind this, but to some extent, this is a new strategy. And as such, I think we kind of need to reset the clock a bit. And that's all I'll say on that. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Eric. Nice advantage to your nice long list is you pretty much hit every item I was going to mention myself. I mean, I would just say that it's encouraging to see that, this board, despite being, significantly different membership than when we were tackling this as a town board, in the prior iteration of our negotiations, we're really coming around to the same place. These ideas that we're seeing in these other annexation agreements from Lyons, from Crested Butte, Bertha, wherever it was, those are very much what we were coming to an agreement with amongst ourselves pre-COVID, when we were working on this actively and before it got dropped. This idea that there should be almost I don't want to say a two-tiered system, but I think Eric's language of a fast track was a better one. If you're a single house trying to annex into town, there should be a fairly straightforward process to that, with the idea of applying for variances for your sewer and your sewer, et cetera, water, whatever it might be. But if you are a multifamily development, either new or existing, then yeah, I think that, and I've always thought that is a extra level of scrutiny. That does require those concept plans. It requires the impact statements. It requires it to go through all of our town boards for comment, community meetings, both within the town of Nederland and amongst our unincorporated Boulder County neighbors. And then, as I've always said as well, if you're looking at something that's going to be more than a single house being annexed to town, yeah, let's take it to a town vote. Let's put it on the onus on the applicant to the annexation to convince the residents of Nederland that this is something positive, that they can in fact bring sufficient water rights for whatever this new annexation might be, that they've convinced town staff that there's capacity to serve them, or that they are providing sufficient monetary recompense to update our systems to serve them. Put it on them and put it on the community to say yes or no. And that's what that's what I was working on years before with the county, trying to come to agreement with. And I think we're now coming back to that. And I think one of the advantages, since it does sound like the town board has similar thoughts on this, there's a lot of work to be done, but I think if we could pull this kind of annexation regulations and procedure together as a town board and pass prior to the end of our current IGA, it provides that bridge to the new IGA, in which case we can, and this is coming from, like Eric said, plenty of history working on with the county on this. And I'm concerned if we extend the current IGA to the end of the year, then we'll come to October and we'll be in very much the same situation we are now. My experience is if we let the IGA expire with these new regulations in place to protect the town, to protect the town's neighbors, to provide a framework for whatever may come, not just open the floodgates to what the state statutes say, but an extra level of scrutiny and steps that meet Nederland's needs. If we have those in place and let the IGA expire in March, then we will be in a position where we will have the county's attention, and we will really be able to negotiate with them over the next 6, 9, 12 months and pull together that next IGA that goes for the next 10, 15, 20 years that addresses our concerns as a community and the county's concerns and the unincorporated county's residents' concerns. And it also then provides that opportunity, like Eric said, our comp plan, I would argue, isn't out of date. It's required to be done every decade, and we're now coming up on that 1 decade. So it's definitely at the end of its life, and we need to address that and build and do the work to come up with a new comp plan that addresses, frankly, the significant changes we've seen to Nederland and to the Front Range in the last decade since that last comp plan. All of these need to work together. And so I'm a big fan of the idea of trying to pull together these annexation procedures and regulations for the town of Nederland that can serve as the bridge between now and we have a comp plan and a new IGA with the county.
Can I comment?
Yeah, is that Tanya?
Yes.
Yes, yeah, please.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, you're talking about coming up with an entire annexation plan in 3 meetings. It seems very rushed to me. I don't think we can do it. We've been talking about a parking, CBD parking ordinances, code, whatever, for months and have made very, very little. We just started to get the survey together. I mean, we would have to do a survey first. with the residents also, I think, before we push ahead. If we're gonna, I mean, I appreciate your tenacity but it's feeling a little bit rushed to me to say that we're gonna have an annexation plan in place by March.
Yeah, I definitely see that, but I also, well, I think
rush. I don't want to rush this process. This is a big deal. This is in place forever until another board comes around and has to sit around and do this again. That's my stance on it. I do not want to rush this process, nor do I want to have work session meetings, every Tuesday to hash it out for, the next month and a half. I don't, like the priority for me is let's work this out. Let's do all the data. Let's do all the research, do all the surveying, and come up with a plan that doesn't feel rushed. And I thought, extend the IGA. I mean, it's no big deal. What's another 2 months?
I see that view from you, and I'm just saying, I think we have actually done a lot of that legwork over the last, the 18 months we did spend in public meetings and communication. So I think there is actually a lot of work done. I think there's a lot of work there we can build on. And so, yeah, I mean, I was just laying out, I laid out my personal view on this. Obviously, this will come to a vote as to whether we want to extend the IGA or if we want to let the IGA expire and have something like this take its place. And I'm just saying, my view is this is a better strategy for the town to work on this. Yes, it'll be a little bit of work over the next couple months, but work on it so that we can have it in place and let the IGA expire. That's my view on our best town strategy moving forward. And I'm glad, I really appreciate that you have a different view, and we're going to, definitely, it's going to be an item of discussion.
I think we have 2 meetings. I mean, how many more meetings do we have before the March 7th deadline or whatever? I mean, it's not a couple months. I hate to tell you. It's already January 18th. So I think this should have been started in August at the minimum to really.
That's when we tried to get in touch with the county and they started blowing us off and didn't respond. So that's the experience. I know.
Started. Us, just because, I don't think it's a realistic endeavor to come up with a crafted for you. This is old news, but there's a lot of new residents in town since this was last talked about. And I think you basically need to start over with community outreach on this. Hate to tell you.
Okay. Thank you, Tanya. I know we have lots of members of the public who want to speak on this too, so I want to get to that right now, and I already see one hand up from Karen Blakemore.
Hi, this is Karen Blakemore again. I am a resident of Nederland. And first I wanted to address the sewer connection question that came up in a Article 2 Sewer System, Section 1323. The first paragraph states that the sewer connection is required if the lot is located within 200 feet of an operational sewer collection main of the town. So that kind of answers that question, I think, about whether the sewer connection is required. I would really like us to take a more top-down approach to annexation and the IGA. And I think the very first thing to do is to have revise our comprehensive plan to include a framework or guidance for annexation. This would be a policy framework. So it would identify under what conditions annexation would be beneficial to the town. And perhaps this would be something like the land would be providing public services of some sort. I don't know. So it really would identify under what conditions the town would want to annex a property. I don't see that, I think we need to have that information first. And then one of the duties of the Planning Commission is to develop a master plan. And the master plan is a plan for the physical development of the municipality. This, you can see this in the state statutes, 3123-206. So that plan would include any areas outside of its boundaries, and it would guide land development decisions as far as zoning, platting, for both land in the current boundaries of the town and outside of the current boundaries. So this is pretty much a 3-mile plan, and I think that would be referenced or included in the comprehensive plan. And I really think that we need this sort of structure in order to make decisions about what land we want to annex into the town. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that
That's 3 minutes, Karen. If you want to tie it up real quick.
Okay, yeah, real quick. We already have annexation procedures in the town code, chapter 15, article 1. My preference is to extend the IGA.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay.
Any other members of the public?
Kathleen Shipeye, 30-year East Mag resident, 18-year business owner. I'm for letting the IGA expire. I agree with Jonathan Baumhover that we're not really receiving that many benefits, and I don't know why we're acting like if the IGA expires and we haven't adopted some kind of a additional annexation verbiage for the town, that there's any crisis. There's a state statute. We're limited right now. The town is protected based on the fact that a percentage of the person's property that's requesting the annexation has to be touching the current Nederland boundary. You're limited to the people who are currently touching. And each individual person has a right, be they 5 next door neighbors, all decide to do it at the same time or not. They're all applying for individual annexations, the way things are written. And there's a whole code it's a state code. So there is protection. To me, if you're creating language for annexation outside of what is the state statute, then you are welcoming annexation in the future. If you don't want annexation in the future, like the comp plans right now, and have always said to infill in the center of town and not to expand. But we already have regulations. The annexation, the IGA doesn't matter if it expires. I'm going to agree with Jonathan Baumhover 100% on that. And there are rules for annexation that protect the community. I'm not for extending those beyond making things harder for people, because I have some respect for property owners that have places. I do think the code needs to change because it does say you need to hook into the town system, but that doesn't really make sense because most people who might want to annex already have a house and their own water and sewer right now. And also, I want to say I agree with everything Tanya said about costs, and I think Julian and Lindsay agreed with that. There shouldn't be any costs whatsoever to the townspeople through the entire annexation process. And that's the fairest way to have things. When it comes to, if you are going to take the step and go outside the boundaries of properties that touch the boundary of the town and consider annexations outside of that realm, then it should be voted on by all the residents. And I don't care if it's one building or multiple buildings. if it goes outside the current state statute allowances for annexation, it should be voted on by the residents in the community. And I want to say I appreciate Tanya's comment on the people who are outside the town limits who don't have a say, who could be impacted. I don't legally know how that.
Kathleen, that's 3 minutes.
Sure, that's fine. I'm going to finish up. Their legal standing, I don't quite know, but I appreciate Tanya throwing that in, and I don't believe there's any rush whatsoever. And I think this is another, everything's an emergency, but it's really not when we think about it. So I want people to think about
Thank you, Kathleen.
Fire and not losing anything.
Any other members of the public like to speak on this?
Yes, I would like to.
Sorry, I see May Gerald's hand up. I will get to you in a minute. May, you have your hand up? If you are on the phone, just as a reminder, you might have to hit *6 to unmute.
Okay, I'm not muted. I don't.
Nope, May. Yes. All right.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is May. Thank you, Chris. I think it's been a good discussion so far. I think that whether we allow it to expire or renew negotiation, that it has to be linked to the comp plan. And I very much agree with what Eric said, that it must flow from the comp plan. I think that when you're thinking about infrastructure costs, you need to be realistic that putting in another lane on the state highway is going to be a collaborative effort, and that this should all flow how we approach the county and what we ask for from the comp plan process. And I'd like to hear a bit more discussion. And then I also agree with Tanya about the radius and the formula. I think we do need to come up with a formula. And then I have a procedural question for Jennifer Madsen. I've done a little bit of reading from time to time about the difference between a town and a city and the role of the mayor. And is it true that in the system that we're in, the mayor is really supposed to be the tiebreaker and not necessarily an advocate? Could you clarify that, please, Jennifer?
Let's hear the rest of the public comment first, and we'll circle back with any questions and
yeah, I'd like to have that answered. Thank you.
Thank you, May. Somebody else was trying to speak there as May was starting.
Yes, me, Kayla Evans, 1250 Eldora Road.
Floor is yours.
My suggestion or hope would be that I think the town should let the IGA expire in the process of renegotiating with the county. I think the county's had 20 years to know that this was going to expire and when, and the fact that they're needing the extension just shows that there wasn't a whole lot of respect towards the town as far as getting their ducks in line to deal with us in a way that showed proper interest. I think also you're going to have a new board coming in April, and if you let it expire, this new board could then decide after they are elected 1 month into whatever the expiration is that they want to proceed with an extension. That doesn't necessarily mean that if it expires you can't pick it up at a certain point. And I also think that the date of letting it go till the new year, it's like you're extending it until you get the work done. If it gets done before the 9-month period, why do you need to let it go to that length? I had a lot of other questions about the process that I can have answered by town hall, but my opinion would be to let it expire, let the new board make the decisions as to how they want to deal with it, start the process again when they are elected, and let the county know that we are serious about wanting to do this, but in a timely fashion, because the county will from my experience, drag on as long as they can possibly do so. And we're not acting in good faith as far as our timeline is concerned either. So I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Kayla.
Yep.
Other members of the public?
Mayor, this is Dawn Baumhover. I'd like to add a comment, please.
Please, Dawn.
Nederland resident. So I agree with the comments that the mayor made. I think there's a lot of confusion. People tend to equate the IGA and annexation. Annexation is currently, the IGA is about who has control, in my understanding. If I understand it correctly, right now the county is in the driver's seat. We have to go to them to ask for annexation. If we let it, which means that people who are currently outside of the town boundary, if they touch the town boundary, can petition the town, not the other way around. The town doesn't go to them and say, we want to develop property. People come to the town and say, we want to be part of the town of Nederland. That is my understanding of how this works. And the IGA governs that. If we let it expire, the town gets in the driver's seat. And they can, and as the trustees have come forth with their opinions, they can kind of dictate how that works. If they let it expire and the work isn't done as brought forth, there are state statutes in place that must be abided by that gives the town protections. There is not going to be rampant development. And the town and the governing board can take the time to figure out thoughtfully how they want to proceed. So I think there's a lot of confusion about that. I am for letting the IGA expire because I would like to see the town of Nederland in the driver's seat, not the Boulder County in the driver's seat dictating to the town of Nederland what they can and can't do for the future for 20 years. That's a long time. I think that we've come a long way. And I do think that you don't have to explain everything to the residents. The onus is on the people to be involved and to be informed. You can't chase every person down and say, hey, this is happening. So thank you for that. I feel pretty strongly about this. This has been contentious for years, and there's tons of information that people can inform themselves on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Any other public comment? Not hearing or seeing any further public comment. I'm going to bring this back to the board, but I'm actually going to go straight to Town Attorney Jennifer Madsen to answer the one question that came directly to her during public comment.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I'd be happy to answer the question. This is something that is actually spelled out in state law. It's section 31-4-302, and the title of that state statute is Mayor's Powers. This is under the statutory towns part of Title 31, which relates to municipal governments. And it says the mayor, or in his absence, one of the trustees who may be elected mayor pro tem, shall preside at all meetings of the Board of Trustees and shall have the same voting powers as any member of said board. The mayor shall be considered a member of the governing body and the Board of Trustees. Then the next sentence goes on to say, however, a town may provide by ordinance that the mayor shall not be entitled to vote on any matter before the board except in the case of a tie vote. And then it goes on, there's further language there, but I do then want to go to the Nederland Municipal Code, which refers then to mayor's duties. And it says the mayor shall preside at all meetings of the Board of Trustees and shall be allowed to cast a vote. The mayor shall be responsible for all ceremonial purposes. And then it goes on. So I think it's pretty clear state statute says the mayor does have a vote in a statutory town, unless by ordinance the mayor only casts a tie vote, and in Nederland has decided that the mayor does have a vote.
Thank you, Jennifer. So before the board, I mean, this is a discussion item of the Board of Trustees, obviously. So I guess what I'm looking for, or what we need to find from the board, is if there's interest in sufficient interest from the trustees, or I guess just really only need two to bring it back as another discussion or action item, to continue to draft some kind of annexation regulations. I know we've heard from some members of the board tonight who think that we shouldn't bother in the our last 4 meetings to approach this. I'm curious if there's if other trustees are in agreement with that, or think we should continue to work on this idea of a Netherlands-specific annexation regulations and procedures, along with as we're deciding whether or not to renew or extend, I should say, the IGA through some undefined period. Is that I want to actually check in before I come back to the board of trustees, check in with town staff Miranda. Is that what you would like to see? Is it, you need direction from the, even a nod of 4 from town staff or from the town board to continue working on the idea of annexation regulations?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful for us.
Okay. Then I'm going to just kind of go through the board, and let's start with you, Tanya, because I think I know what your view would be, but let us know.
Oh, yeah, I think we should continue working on it. I just don't think we should rush it. I don't see, that's what all I was saying. I think we should have our own policy that's very Netherlands specific to our needs. But I have a question that I will ask when you're done with this not a 4.
Okay. Julian?
Yeah, I think I made it clear over the last few meetings that I'm kind of ambivalent regarding whether we allow the IGA to expire or not. I'm not positive I see serious problems either way. I certainly think we need to have a fully fleshed out annexation policy with serious procedures for our town. And I definitely believe that we need to continue this work. I mean, if this does turn out, as the mayor has proposed, hopefully, to be something that is well established, perhaps, by the time the IJ is about to expire, perhaps we may feel comfortable that, we're that close, so we think the next board can take it over and finish it. Maybe let the IGA expire. Again, I'm kind of neutral on the IGA expiring part, but definitely fleshing out our annexation ordinance, I think, is a very good idea. And that's something this board has done very well, fixing ordinances that were broken, fleshing out ordinances that needed to be fleshed out. I don't know, I think we have kind of a pedigree on that. So yeah, definitely we want to continue with this process, regardless what happens with the IGA.
Thank you, Julian. Lindsay?
I don't have strong feelings either way about letting the IGA expire or not. I don't really feel like it's urgent. We don't have anything before us for annexation policies. They would affect, at this point, there's nothing before the board. So I think we can take our time with the policies, but I think it sounds like that we're in agreement mostly on quite a few of these things about, trying to include residents in the process, give them a voice, not passing along costs to residents. These are things that I think we all easily agree on. So it doesn't feel like there's, anything really holding us back from adding these, on top of the state's current annexation requirements. So I think, we're starting a good place. I don't feel like there's a whole lot of work to be done. So I'd like to continue on and negotiate it. And if we let the IGA expire and we don't have these things voted on, I don't think it's, the end of the world either. So I say let's just keep rolling forward.
Thank you, Lindsay. Eric?
Yeah, I think I come down, I guess, quite firmly on the side that I remain unconvinced that we have enough time to do this properly before the IGA expires. I appreciate you know, the desire to do it in that amount of time, and I think it would be great if things moved that quickly. But I'm not sure they do, and maybe I'm wrong about that. But I also think we just need to ensure that, you know, especially when we talk about creating an annexation process that involves the public, that we don't exclude the public from the creation of that process, because that would be foolish. So I think we need to make sure that because this is a kind of a new ordinance that we're going to be drafting here, even though it's the extension of an old conversation, that it needs to be robustly publicly vetted through all the relevant advisory boards in town, which is all of them, and you know, through the planning commission, and in multiple, at least, you know, certainly more than one public meeting that this should be addressed in, allowing opportunity for as many people to give feedback as humanly possible. So I'm not convinced that we can do that from now and the time that that agreement expires. And I am similarly not attached to the agreement itself. The thing that I am concerned about is kind of legislative responsibility. And I see it as our responsibility to ensure that our intentions as a board are the only thing that we allow to be put down on paper and become the actual law of the land when it comes to Nederland. So to let it expire because we're close to having an annexation policy, to me, is unfortunately, I think, a negligent course of action to take. Not because of the content of the IGA, simply from a legislative responsibility perspective. And so I would be completely uncomfortable letting it expire without having publicly vetted, clearly articulated ordinance in place that controlled annexation for the town of Nederland, purely on that principle alone, as what I think is responsible legislative procedure. So that is my stance on it. I don't think we have the time. I wish we did. I don't think we do. I think we need to make sure we do it right, and to do it right, I think we are going to need to take more time. I think we will get close. I just don't think we're going to get there. And so I would even be in favor of extending the IGA agreement for less than to the end of the year. I'd be in favor of extending it for 4 months, if that's what we thought it would take to get us over the line. 3 months even, if that's what we could, if we thought we could pull it off in that time. So yeah, that's where I kind of stand on this. I think we're going to have, for me, I would have to vote probably in favor of extending, because I don't think we're going to get this done in time. And I don't think it's really possible. I don't think it's because we're not capable. I think it's because it's not possible.
Thank you very much, Eric. And Alan.
I agree with Eric. I think we should extend the IGA, but I think that I don't think it's necessarily an either or. I do think we should continue this discussion and work on coming up with our own annexation agreement. And, you know, if we do agree to extend the IGA, we should say, amend it to say that it will be with the understanding that Nederland is working on its own annexation policy, and that we're extending it with the notion that we will be developing and processing our own annexation policy, and then we will be in communication with the county about that policy, so that the extension of the agreement does not preclude us from adopting our own annexation policies at any time, you know, even before the expiration of the IGA. I think that would help to motivate the county to realize that, you know, yes, we'll keep it in place, but we're really serious about having a different approach to annexation that, you know, gives Nederland residents a major role in any decisions.
Thank you, Alan. Town staff, do you have questions for the board, or do you think you have an idea on kind of how we want to move forward?
I think we're good. Jennifer, do you have any questions? I think
So I heard that the direction was to continue to work on annexation regulations. I've taken notes in terms of what what are the highlights of the ordinances that I provided to you that you like, that you'd like to see in a Nederland regulation. So is the direction then for me to start working on drafting an ordinance?
No.
I think what we might want to do is more collate some of our ideas and not go to a full ordinance level, but collate some of those ideas and bring it back as an additional discussion item. Because looking at the master schedule and keep working on it as a board and discussing it, taking public input, but I don't think we're at the level of drafting an ordinance yet for sure.
I do think that was maybe one of the points, just even going into this discussion, is like, if the board could please email Jennifer and I some of your feedback, some of the things to work off of, because we're not sure when we don't hear from people. I know originally Mayor Pro Tem was going to connect with us. So that would be really helpful if you could each individually email us some of your thoughts. I know we've obviously discussed tonight, but if you have more leaving this meeting, that would be helpful.
All right. Well, board, thank you for the discussion.
I had a couple questions still. This
Okay.
is Tanya. One is a question. One of the comments from the resident was saying the IGA is so much more than just about annexation. And I'm just curious because when we had a work session about the IGA, the Attorney Mattson spent the entire hour talking about annexation, and we didn't really talk about anything else. And so I'm wondering then, what are the other aspects of the IGA that aren't annexation? Why was the meeting 100% focused on annexation? Because it led me to believe that it was a very important document for Nederland's ability to annex.
It certainly has been. I know we've had other trustees and members of the public raise the idea of expanding the IGA, or excuse me, I'm already losing the ability to speak tonight. Expanding the IGA to include other aspects of our relationship with the county. I think we focused on the annexation primarily because it was previously the most contentious issue.
Okay. And do we have a 3-mile plan in place from your past conversations about annexation that you guys discussed? Like where is that document found?
There is not a 3-mile plan.
Okay.
So that was a previous requirement under state law that isn't anymore.
But do we want to think that that's a relevant thing? It does seem pretty relevant that we should have something like that in place, even though it's not required.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else on the board feel like maybe that should be some direction for staff to go in, is to help create some sort of 3-mile plan to deal with all the issues that surround our town, that plague our town, our water issues? And I mean, is that just me who thinks that's important?
It is not. I mean, I don't think it should necessarily be a 3-mile plan because it's kind of big for a 1.5 square mile town.
Right. Okay.
But but what was in the current proposed revision to the IGA, which is on the Boulder County website. This is an IGA that was never passed, but it does have primary planning area information on it. And so something that addressed maybe Nederland's primary planning areas, I think would be good to have in an IGA with the county. Yes, that was what I was mentioning before. If we do have an IGA, we could remove their authority, their decision-making authority from it, the counties, but instead make an agreement that they understand where we are looking at in terms of serving the needs of Nederland residents and what kinds of parcels of land we might be looking at in order to serve those needs. So that's definitely something I think we should do. Yes.
Okay. And then I just want to remind the members of the board or even people in the
commenting that it's not that important to get the public outreach on this. That just in our last meeting regarding public parking in town, one of our board members became very passionate about the need to get all the businesses and residents involved in anything that we do, and create surveys and get as much interaction as possible. And I think that this has far bigger ramifications than any sort of parking code that we can come up with. So I just want to again mention to everybody that we should not forget how important to get the public involved. And on that basis, since we spent time today putting together a survey regarding parking, wouldn't it be important to come up with some kind of survey of what our residents think should be included in an annexation plan? Not that we have to listen to everything said, but wouldn't that be the start of something we need to be doing, is getting public outreach? And at least the minimum would be a simple just Google Documents survey. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is I'd always thought that you had to be adjacent to a town property to be annexed. But a lot of conversation tonight was talking about single homes that just want to join town. And I think there's so much to think about. That's why we can't just rush it. If something like that would happen, how do we deal with, say, Public Works maintains our roads if you're part of town, but CDOT, does Public Works come and just fix the pothole in front of their house or plow only that little part of the street in front of their house? Like, I'm not really sure why that kept getting mentioned, like the idea that there'd be isolated islands of homes.
No, that would
I
never
don't think
happen.
anyone
State
argued
law
that.
doesn't allow
Yeah,
for that.
and there were people saying, if you just want to have a house and you already have your hookups, why would you want? And I know we're getting off topic, but I just want to mention we're not off. These are a lot of details to hash out, and so we need to be have a strategy for getting there.
Agreed.
It's a lot.
Yep.
A lot. It's not, there's a lot of details. So, that's some more questions. I think they got answered. So,
All right. Well,
what about a
you're-
survey? Do we need to do that? That was my question.
My
Miranda?
feeling about the survey is that we're not yet to the point that we understand enough to compose a survey.
Right. That's kind of true.
You have to, you want to ask questions. So I'm not a politician. I don't know how this works in a city or a town, but I know that from the standpoint of engineering, you don't go to a committee and say, how do we design this solution? Somebody has to step up and say, here's a possible way of solving this problem, and at least get a general idea of how to solve the problem before you bring it before people, because it's just confusing to everybody if you don't do that. So I think we talk about, my feeling is, we talk about this a little more until we can agree on what might comprise a useful and productive survey. And then I think the survey is a great idea. Absolutely.
Okay. I just know that some people were kind of in a hurry to get this done, and so I'm just putting the kind of list of things that have to happen before we can even get close to coming up with a resolution for the Attorney Mattson to start writing up. All right, that's it, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. And thank you all, the whole board, for really good discussion on this tonight, and for the members of the public that joined us for comments. Obviously, this will be ongoing. I am going to propose a little break here. It's 9:23 p.m. by my clock. I would say we come back at 9:30 to tackle the next discussion item, which is the watershed ordinance. So I will see you guys all again in 7 minutes. Regardless of how people voted, All right, everybody, by that same clock, it is now 9:30 p.m. And I know we've got several things to get through here still this evening, so I'll jump right back into this. I believe the idea of a watershed ordinance is going to be introduced to us by Jennifer Manson.
Yes, that is correct. I'm introducing the watershed, possibility of watershed regulations. Under Colorado law, a municipality does have the authority to enact a watershed ordinance to protect water from pollution and the waterworks from injury. The watershed ordinance may extend over the territory occupied by such waterworks and all reservoirs, streams, trenches, pipes, and drains used in and necessary for the waterworks, and over the stream and source from which the water is taken and 5 miles above the point from which it is taken. So this watershed ordinance could be in an area that is not within the Nederland municipal boundaries. In your packet tonight, I included a map that's a lawyer's type map of possible area for watershed ordinance. If the Board of Trustees did adopt a watershed ordinance, it would require property owners to submit an application for review by the municipality before conducting any prohibited activity. You could define what is prohibited activities, so it wouldn't just be limited to any construction or land use within the watershed. It would be activities that may pollute the watershed. And then what you would be looking for from the applicant is demonstration that the applicant is putting in best practices so that the pollution wasn't occurring, or to prevent the a significant amount of pollution. So I will stop there. That's really a high level overview, and I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm actually going to kick off here with a question because, as you've shown on the map here, we see the intake point for the Nederland water treatment plant there at A on the far right of the blue line. And then that's basically Middle Boulder Creek extending 5 miles upstream. And so a watershed ordinance, I mean, you say it's, on that stream. What about things that are, only a mile upstream, but, a quarter mile to the south? Is there is it have to be the property has to be touching Middle Boulder Creek? Or is it something on the steep slope where everything they do flows into Boulder Creek?
So it would be, if the Board of Trustees decides to go forward, one of the first steps would be to draw this map. What is the watershed? And so that's going to have to be, we'd have to hire somebody, an expert in this area, to put together a map that defines what the watershed is.
So it is the watershed because, I mean, raindrop that falls on the hillside flows down into a number of tributary streams, trickles, rivulets that eventually join Middle Boulder Creek. That is part of the Middle Boulder Creek watershed within 5 miles. It's
Right.
not specifically the creek itself alone that is the only object, right?
Right, that's correct.
But I mean, and I also note, just, looking at this, it's, a 5 miles upstream is very much, this is entirely limited, even with the watershed definition, to the Eldora Valley. That is because that is where the town of Nederland draws its water supply from. Though, even a watershed engineer or watershed scientist would look at this and be drawing, limiting it to the Eldora Valley.
Yes.
Okay. And that list of prohibited activities, do we have to specifically define them all ourselves? Or is it the type of thing where if we don't specifically call them out as prohibited, there's still other ones that are prohibited? Like how detailed do we have to get with a list of prohibited activities?
So you could include a catch-all, and that catch-all would be some type of activity which would reasonably pollute the town's water supply. You know, there's no requirement to go into detail. The detail does provide notice to property owners of activities where a permit would be required. So that's the benefit of listing out all of the prohibited activities in greater detail.
Okay. I mean, yeah, personally, I see this very much as an extension of the rights of nature declaration we made in the summer, is sort of taking it to the next step to protect specifically the town water supply and providing, that sense of safety for our town residents and our drinking water. Other trustees have questions for Attorney Medson on this, and we'll begin with Lindsay on this one.
I think this is a really good idea. And I also was kind of worried about trying to list out all of the activities, because I feel like that's really hard to do, and especially, for something that's going to be, with us for a very long time, we can't possibly see what things might be occurring in the future, or, what we might call certain activities in the future. So I certainly think a catch-all is going to be important, to make sure that we account for things that we don't have names for yet, or that we might miss. So otherwise, I'm on board with this, and I appreciate all the hard work and the research that was put into this.
Thank you, Lindsay. Eric?
I had a question about the word district that's being used by some of these regulations. Water protection district. Does that operate in any? Does district have any meaning similar to other uses of the word district?
It doesn't really. I think that I'd have to look more closely at the ordinances, but it's my guess is that that's really the map.
Okay. Just because usually a district has its own board and all these other things. I'm just making sure that that's not a thing here.
It is not.
Okay. And yeah, I mean, I think we should, because we have the ability to do this, we absolutely should do this. It is a natural extension of the conversations that we had earlier, as the mayor said, and I think we should pursue it. I think we should enumerate as many detailed things as possible, and yes, include a catch-all term in there as well to account for things we might not have foreseen. But we should absolutely implement one of these, and it's nice that there's other towns very similar to ours in the very same state that have done a lot of this work for us. So I think that we should certainly look to what they've done, and maybe even ask them what's worked and what hasn't worked in the past, if any of this has ever come up for them as a town, and what kind of maybe like legal issues have maybe arisen from it. That would be nice to know, some case studies, so that we know what we're getting ourselves into from a legal standpoint of what might happen if somebody does challenge the water protection district that Nederland might have.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Eric. Julian?
Yeah, it is interesting to see that we have this authority. I was unaware of it, and I greatly appreciate your bringing it to our attention, Jennifer. Yeah, as an insecure man, anything that extends our power makes me happy. But I'm worried about enforcement of whatever these regulations are, and monitoring what is happening along the watershed. As I look at this and I consider an ordinance to protect this watershed, this looks like an awful lot of area where someone could surreptitiously slip something in and start doing things that mess with us. And of course, they can do that now. But the question is, with an ordinance, don't we give ourselves responsibility to oversee this? And if so, how do towns of our size manage to do that? I mean, it would be protecting our watershed is important, but writing an ordinance that we can't enforce, that has problems of its own. How do towns our size manage to enforce an ordinance of this sort?
I've had two conversations with other lawyers in that have worked with municipalities who have these watershed ordinances. One is the city of Victor. They adopted the ordinance, and my understanding is it's never come into play. So there haven't been any applications and no permits issued. That might not be absolutely true, but this is the information that the lawyer shared. The other municipality is Newcastle, and they do use their watershed ordinance. The way that they've enforced it, one, the county knows about it, and I was told that the county has been good about telling land use applicants that they need to contact the municipality and obtain a permit. And so there's that relationship with the county.
That's right. And in fact, this could be part of our upcoming IGA, where we require the county to inform us. So, okay, that's thank you. Please continue. Whoa, that's right. That's one of the good uses for the IGA. Please proceed, Jennifer.
So then the other option is to send a letter to the property owner saying, you know, you need to comply with this, with the watershed ordinance. You'd have to have knowledge that this activity was going on. And then the last step is taking the property owner to court and seeking injunctive relief, which the town could do if you adopted a watershed ordinance. And you could tell the court that this property owner isn't complying with the law and you want a injunction prohibiting them from conducting the activity.
And yet, over that long distance, I'm still wondering, how do we find out without sending out patrols? I could see patrols on airboats going up the river. That'd be kind of cool. But without some kind of control, how do you detect that? I'm almost thinking that, you know, where there is statutory authority, it strikes me there's also statutory responsibility. And so what's going through my mind is, how do we spot this? And I suppose one possibility would be to monitor the water going in to our inlet. Yeah, see, testing water is kind of expensive. I mean, you wouldn't know there was a problem until you knew that there was something bad in the water, unless you were taking airboats up and down the river. So I guess I think this is a very good idea. And I'm just suggesting that what we need to do if we pass such an ordinance is, I would just remind everyone on the board that we need to think through very carefully how we enforce that, the compliance within that area.
And I think it's worth having additional conversations, and perhaps, you know, Miranda can have conversations with managers and town administrators of these municipalities to find out how the ordinance really is implemented and how these property owners are notified and how you find out that property owners are doing something.
Yeah. It would be good to know that this can be practically enforced before putting a lot of time into writing an ordinance that we're not confident we can enforce. Nonetheless, anything we can do to protect our watershed is good. The question is this the practical solution to those problems, or is there a different solution? Yeah, I think this is a wonderful thing to think about very carefully and to consider very carefully. And the only thing I will be bringing up as we go through this is, let's make sure we've got some kind of a plan for how to enforce it. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Julian. If only for the image of airboat patrols cruising up through. I'll volunteer to take over that duty. That'll be
I
fun.
volunteer too. We'll do a rotor. Yeah, that'd be great.
Tanya, questions or thoughts, comments?
Yeah. Yes. You guys hear me?
Yep.
You hear me? Hello? Oh,
Yeah, we can hear
well,
you.
I was going to just make a a comment on your patrols. They would have to be electric. It. Oh, you're breaking up too. I was just saying they would have to be electric patrols, so you wouldn't have to damage the watershed with gasoline.
Absolutely.
But have you guys run this by the water attorney? It was Aaron?
Did.
Hello?
Yes. Trustee Corvalon, we did
guys
run
hear
it
me?
by him.
Oh, I don't
Sorry,
hear you
Tanya.
guys.
Okay.
Well, first, I if you can hear me, I know we ran into some issues with our water rights, and our water attorney came back. Yeah, so you guys ran this by him, and he thinks it's a good thing.
Yes. We did.
Okay. Awesome. And I agree with Julian, of course, like our other rights of nature. Am I breaking up? I'm sorry. Well, I think it's a good idea overall. Would this in any way impact the propane company on the reservoir? You guys hear me?
We can hear you just fine. Not sure you can hear us.
Oh, I'm back. I think I'm back. You hear me?
Yep. And no, this only affects upstream of our water intake point.
Okay, so that is over currently up by Eldora, sort of.
The high school, yeah.
The high school, yeah. Well, I don't really see anything against it, except like again, we don't want to just do something that's just only in name only. But thanks for bringing this up. I imagine it's gonna come back to us in a more fine-tuned way, or is it just this is it, kind of?
We would actually have something come back as an ordinance. This is kind of the discussion item, and it would come back fleshed out. I think we may have lost you again, Tanya. Trustee Apt.
I concur that it's a good idea. And I think the notion of working with the county on it.
Thank you.
Tanya, you have,
Thanks, everybody.
you back?
I'm back. Oh, great. Anyway, I think I don't really have any comments. I agree a lot with what Julian was saying, and I think it's a good thing, though, overall, for sure. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Thanks, Tanya. Back to you, Alan.
Yeah, I would agree that it's important that we make this part of the intergovernmental agreement with the county, so we can, have potentially co-enforcement of this. So that as projects are proposed within the county, it comes to our attention, and then a permit has to be negotiated with us. And I think the other thing I'd find useful would be to see the maps for the other towns, how broad their watersheds are.
All great, and then.
Pardon me? So anyway, I think that, the map that was provided is useful, but I would also like to see what the dimensions of the other municipalities are in terms of their watersheds, and how, broad or wide our watershed would be, as well as how long it would be in terms of jurisdiction. As the mayor brought up, water, the snow and rain fall in a broad area that then flow to Middle Boulder Creek. So how we define that would be important. But anyway, definitely think it's an excellent idea.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for the comments. This is a discussion item, so I will throw this open to, actually, before I throw this open to public comment, do I have a motion to extend the meeting to 10:30?
So moved.
Do I have a
Second.
second? We have a second. Macy, if you'd call that vote.
Trustee Coombs Ismail,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Abt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
Trustee Corvallin,
Yeah.
and Mayor Larson.
Yes. Thank you, Macy, and thank you, everyone. Now we'll throw this open to public comment. If anyone would like to speak on this, and I'd also remind our call-in users, if you're on your phone, you may have to hit *6 to unmute yourself. Otherwise, catch our attention, and I see a hand up from Karen Blakemore. Is that a new hand?
Yes.
Very
New
good,
hand.
Karen.
Karen Blakemore, Nederland resident. It's my understanding that we have storage rights in Barker Reservoir. And so I'm wondering if the watershed should include all waterways that enter Barker Reservoir, which would include Coontrack Creek and North Beaver Creek. I know that we're not using that water currently, but it potentially it could be used in the future.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think just to clarify here, that's contingent water right usage, and certainly would be a question for our town attorney. But as we know, currently don't access any water from Barker Reservoir. The current ordinance, I don't believe, could be written to include anything upstream of Barker, only upstream of our current intake point. Just based on my conversations so far with Attorney Madsen and Aaron Ladd, our water attorney. Other public comment on this? I am not seeing or hearing any further public comment. So I'll bring this back to the board. And I guess I'll bring this back with a question to Attorney Madsen, kind of piggybacking off of something that Alan asked is, regarding these update or a more detailed map, and specifically one's kind of, one that's like what the other communities have adopted, but also one that would be more useful for our conversations moving forward. Is that kind of the next step we would need to take before adopting this ordinance would be engaging an engineer to do a watershed map?
Well, I would suggest that maybe the next step would be a little bit more investigation and discovery in terms of what other municipalities have done. And I can have conversations with some of these other municipalities and figure out how they went about that, how they defined the watershed, what they do for enforcement, a lot of the questions that you raised tonight. And I can work with Miranda also to put all this information together so that you have a little better idea of what the next steps going forward would be. And then, yes, I do think that working with an engineer to draw that map would be a second step.
And how much time do you think is this the sort of the research steps? Is this something we should look at bringing back at our next board meeting or the second meeting in February?
My vote is the second. I feel like, to Attorney Madsen's point, I can also connect with other town managers and reach out on that listserv. So I think and Jennifer, if you disagree, let me know. But I think having a month and bringing it back at the second meeting would be ideal.
That's fine for me. Yes.
Okay.
It would be especially helpful to know how effective towns' legal challenges based on these kinds of ordinances have been in the past, if they have been at all.
All right. Well, I believe it sounded like, at least listening to the board, and anyone can speak up if they disagree, but it sounds like we had at least a nod of 4 to continue moving forward and put that on the second meeting and continue the research. So, yeah, thank you very much for bringing that to us, and look forward to seeing that next step at the second meeting. On to the next discussion item, which is back to you, Jennifer, on 1041 regulations. You're busy tonight.
So I feel like this is deja vu because the last time this 1041 regulations was before the Board of Trustees was another late night.
And then we saw nuclear detonations.
Right. Yes.
Ooh.
Yes. So let me see, where do I want to start here? So this is an option for the town for adopting regulations. Again, it's another permitting process. And these regulations would apply to specific areas of statewide concern, which are normally not matters that local government could get involved in. But the state law says that if the municipality designates the areas of state concern that they want to regulate, then with those regulations in place, the property owner would have to come before the town for a permit. So since this matter was before you in December, I did have a conversation with Miranda and Chris Pelletier and Cynthia Bakke. Chris Pelletier designated some areas within the town that could be included in these 1041 regulations. I think the most obvious one would be the state highway. So one example of where these 1041 regulations have come into place is another municipality that my firm works with, and that's Blue River. Highway 9 runs through Blue River, and there was a desire by CDOT to put a chain-up station along Highway 9 right in Blue River. And the municipality, Blue River, put these 1041 regulations in place. And because the regulations were adopted, CDOT needed to work with Blue River in terms of mitigating the effects of that chain-up station. So that's one example of how they could come into place. The other ones are spelled out, areas of state concern are spelled out in the AIM, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I'll start here again with one quick one. In terms of, do you need a separate 1041 ordinance regulation for each of these areas? Or is it kind of you do one and then that affects, if it's CDOT, forest, water, whatever the entity is?
You would just need one set of 10 regulations. So essentially what the steps would be in this process is that you as the Board of Trustees would designate the areas and activities of concern that you would like to regulate. And then you would adopt the regulations, and it would be a permitting process. So CDOT would have to come to the town, file an application, and then go through a review process.
Okay. Throw this open, questions from other trustees. Trustee Apt?
It sounds pretty straightforward to me, and I think it's a good thing to have in place. So, particularly with negotiating with entities like CDOT, it gives us some clout to bring them to the table, since sometimes it seems that we are in the dark about what their plans are and their timing on things. So I think we should move ahead with this.
Okay. Trustee Corvallin?
I'm right now I'm having a hard time reading it on my web browser, and so from what I remember and what the discussions are, I don't really have any questions, but I'm also not 100% sure of what's it's about. So unfortunately, I was trying to reread it just now and my browser shut down. So maybe come back to me.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Yeah, technological fun times. Trustee Coombs Ismail.
You really sold me with the CDOT example from Blue River. I mean, I was going to say I think that this is something kind of neat, but maybe not a legislative priority for us at this moment. But with that example, yes, I think we should do this. We are so at their mercy as a town because of the way our roads are designed, and yeah, to have any kind of leverage in those conversations could be valuable. And then the other properties that are designated there could be interesting as well. I feel like there could be some interesting things going on with the waterfront, and also Middle Boulder Creek. I see is outlined there, probably where the tungsten mine is, so where the Wolf Tongue mine is. So it does make some sense that we might start to put these things into place, but maybe prioritize the highway for now.
Thank you, Eric. Lindsay?
I think this is an important thing for us to consider. And as I'm also having trouble with audio here, I just wanted some clarification that if we enact this, that we can pick and choose areas and keep adding to it over time. Like as Eric was saying, we prioritize the highway and then add other areas later on. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you could adopt one area or activity of state concern, and then later on adopt a new one, or another board of trustees could do that.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly think being notified and being involved in the conversation with anything happening on the main road to town, I think that's clearly an important issue for us. So that's an easy no-brainer to me.
All right. And Julian?
The others have covered what I was thinking about. When I first read this, I was thinking, is this a tranche of things we have to write all together? But of course, no. This is just informing us that we have this ability, and we should be using our knowledge that we have this ability in future ordinances and in future policies and contracts with the state. And so, yeah, I like the idea of prioritizing the highway and make that our pathfinder. Invoke this legislation in order to gain additional control over the highway going through our town. I think that's looking very good, and it's good that we know this now, and I look forward to invoking it.
Thank you, Julian. Let's take public comment on this, since it sounds like the board is we've all had our say. Anyone from the public who would like to speak on the idea of 1041 regulations, now would be your chance. As usual, catch our eye, let us know, and you can have up to 3 minutes. And if you're on the phone, remember *6. Not hearing any. I'll bring this back to the board. It sounds like the board is certainly in agreement of moving forward with the idea of targeting the CDOT parts first. What do you need from us, Jennifer, to move this forward?
If CDOT is the highway is the only issue, then really I can bring it forward in an ordinance form, because like I said, we've done this work for another client. And so I have a good ordinance in place if that's the interest.
And how much more work would it be to, I mean, because, you know, Chris Pelletier flagged 3 other areas here that are of non-CDOT, you know, two forests and two water and forest. Is that a significant amount of additional work and research needed, or?
I'd have to look at it a little bit more to see if we need to actually draw any maps or designate areas, specific areas. So I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay.
Mayor,
and
I'd like to suggest that we may be best off to pick only one of these items first and then carry it through and see what it takes to make that ordinance work for us. Just a thought, maybe start with one, see what happens first.
Great minds think alike. That's exactly what I was going to circle and come back to. Is like, it sounds like we should try the CDOT because, like Jennifer said, it is something we can add on to. And should the next board decide that you know, the Middle Boulder Creek piece is a high priority, then they can direct Jennifer and town staff to amend this and include that. So I think it sounds like, or I see Eric leaning in.
Yeah, just that I think it would be pretty clear what areas might be Forest Service related within town boundaries. That could be a pretty easy one to define, potentially. Just as well as the highway being quite simple. I mean, just because if the Forest Service is doing, you know, cutting work or things like that, then maybe there's something in 1041 regulations that can help us. But I'm happy with just going with the highway as well.
You know, I think, you know, given, you know, the as we've mentioned a couple times, you know, what, 4 meetings left of this board, 3 meetings left. Perhaps we target the CDOT to begin with. And then Eric, you and Julian are both not up for re-election. So you guys get to carry this flame forward if the Middle Boulder Creek is a piece to continue to work on next summer.
Or at least keep kicking the can.
There we go. So I think, Jennifer, I think, yeah, working with the CDOT piece and bringing that forward, you know, I think that would be our next step.
Okay, I can do that.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, there we go. We are through with our discussion items and action items for this evening. I know that was a long agenda, and I really appreciate everyone's focus and really good discussions this evening. Moving into our reports phase, Miranda, anything? I'm thinking you want a couple things to highlight out of staff reports.
I just want to highlight a few things. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice again. Chris Pelletier left us. We said farewell to him last Thursday. Just kind of an oversight of what's happening there with Public Works is we are not going to replace a Public Works manager at this time. We split the department into 3 separate departments now, with utilities being overseen by Jen Landon, streets, Emmett Pelletier supporting with, and then parks, we're actively hiring for that person and hope to know who that is by the end of the week. So those are some quick staffing updates. Just a reminder too, we have the joint session with Boulder County next Tuesday, the 25th at 6 o'clock, where we'll be discussing the Crossing Caribou Mine. And then, as you all know, and this is a little old now, but a few weeks ago, we did lose a beloved member of our team, Sharon Ferguson. It was an unexpected medical incident, but we are definitely mourning and sad to have lost her and sending lots of love to her family right now. And so those are kind of the highlights. We do still have Dawn here, so I'd love to invite Dawn if you have anything you want to quickly throw out. Otherwise, all of our reports are in the packet.
The only thing I'll highlight is that the testing numbers for COVID for what is this, Tuesday? For yesterday, were down. So our positivity rate is heading in the proper direction. Cases are going down. So we're still seeing about 160 tests. So encouraging everybody to be vigilant, but looking good. I think that would be all, and thank you for approving the ballot or discussing the ballot language tonight.
Thanks, Dawn. And yeah, I would just remind everyone, if you have questions for town staff on anything in these reports, reach out to them. I just want to call out, I just want to thank all the town staff. These reports are so thorough, detailed. I really appreciate the time and effort everyone puts into these to let us know what's going on, because I know a lot of the time we don't have a lot of insight into the individual departments and the day-to-day operations. So I really appreciate seeing these every month to see what's going on around town that maybe we haven't heard of or seen, because it's just outside of our public view. So thank you guys for putting in that effort. And then, of course, I come back to staff report. Your board reports, and I did not get mine into the to a written one, so apologies for that. But actually, a lot of the things I've been doing this over the last month are meetings that were covered in other people's reports, in the Big Springs egress meetings, things like that. And then I've also been doing a number of things related to press avails and national things related to the Marshall Fire, and really the Marshall Fire and the climate emergency's impact, the climate crisis' impact on fires in the West, and trying to continue to highlight the vulnerability of our communities, both not just here in the mountains, but also now obviously down on the plains and then the suburbs due to the crisis. So that's really kind of covers what I've been doing over the last month. Trustee Apt.
Other than the resolution we discussed tonight, the climate resolution, I did work with CC4CA, excuse me, in lobbying the Public Utilities Commission to put pressure on Excel to accelerate, no pun intended, their plan to get to 100% renewable energy more quickly, and highlighted the fact that we have a town goal that we cannot achieve unless they become more ambitious in their use of renewable energy and retire their coal-fired plants on a more aggressive schedule, in particular the one in Pueblo, which has been an ongoing environmental and financial disaster that's just costing ratepayers without doing anybody any good. So other than that, it's just working with SAB.
Thank you, Alan. Eric.
Nothing really to add to what I put in the report, but PROSEP continues to do quite a bit, and it is a nonstop action over there. So drop in whenever you have the time. And Boulder County Consortium of Cities, I missed the last couple of meetings and have not been reporting on that, but just to report what the potential topics for the upcoming BCCC meetings are going to be in 2022. And if you have anything that you would like me to bring to that consortium regarding Nederland, regarding any of those topics, please let me know so that I don't neglect to do so.
Thank you, Eric. Tanya? Oh, I think we've lost Tanya, actually. I don't see her online anymore. I think her internet connectivity might have finally gotten to her.
She sent me a message saying she was worried she might fall off, so that's what happened.
Okay. Lindsay.
Yep, we had a BZA meeting finally. I think this was the second one of the year where we got to elect our chair and vice chair. I've also been working with Tanya and town staff on the CBD parking requirements. And today just finished up a survey. So we got a survey for the citizens and also a survey for the businesses, since the businesses will have different concerns than everyday people who are frequenting those shops. So those should be coming out soon. They're going to get reviewed by the DBA. Also will come before the board for input on the questions, and then we will release them into the wild and see what people have to say about our parking, and hopefully we can move forward with some new parking requirements. And I think that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Last but not least, Julian.
Planning Commission has been totally derelict, doing nothing. There you go. I'll be reporting
Lazy
next
bums.
month. I'll be reporting next month on what they do this month.
Very good. Thank you. We have reached that fun time. Does anyone have any other business to raise with the board?
I am actually talking with Miranda about something that has been bugging me for a long time, probably because I'm very old and I don't see very well. We now have a large printer, and I've been working with Miranda to see if we can print large D-size maps of the town that can be used for reference by the trustees. I don't know if that's going to be useful or not, and I'm only bringing it up right now so that if there are any applications for this that trustees think of that they may want to mention to Miranda, please do so. The idea is that we have a digital copy of a base map of Nederland and surrounds. This would be very helpful for our watershed discussion. And then overlays for street names, rivers, large buildings, and subdivisions, that sort of thing. And it could be a case where within the town, when we do work with our engineering firms, we say, don't send us a picture, send us the digital format, and we'll be able to print as many pictures as we need. So anyway, just a thought, just thought I'd let everybody know that that's kind of in the works, not quite done, but I mentioned it to Miranda, and staff has been very supportive.
I 100% agree. We need digital files. Absolutely.
We really need something like that for Trails Master Planning on ProSap. So we've been talking about doing that for a while.
You could provide trails in our standard format as an overlay to the base map, and we could do all sorts of cool stuff with that. Yeah.
And so town acquired one of the really large printers from Business Connection when they went out of business. And so we're looking into the possibility of how much can we do ourselves versus maybe need to contract out. And so loop JVA into it as well, since they have a ton of maps, but we're really hopeful that we'll be able to do this large scale printing and large scale files. Trustee Danforth here on site. It now lives in our annex, and it's a fun addition to our team.
That's awesome. I know, back when I first got involved with the Board of Trustees and I'd almost call it the pre-digital era, back in 2007, something that happened early on was, a new trustee was given large printed maps of the zoning map and maps of the town for reference, because it was so much harder to get good digital ones at that time. And it certainly, it might be a good thing, with the new board, because you have new trustees coming on who maybe don't immediately understand what you mean when you say Sunnyside or some subdivision names and things like that, that they have that reference and maybe even a printout that they can post up on their office wall at home. And
absolutely. That would have helped me a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really cool.
So that's all I had.
Awesome. Anyone else?
John Scarf with the Mountaineer.
Yeah, John.
Yeah, the visitor center has hard copy maps of the whole town. They are in plastic sheets, and they have all of the towns and everything listed there. And you ought to be able to copy that and use that as an example for what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. One new base map source. Other business? Who would like the honor?
I move to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Julian got there. Eric, you get the second? All right, Macy.
Mayor Larson,
Yes.
Trustee Taylor,
Yes.
Trustee Apt,
Yes.
Trustee Danforth,
Yes.
and Trustee Coombs Ismail.
Yes.
Meeting is so adjourned at 10:20 p.m. Thank you guys for a great
Thanks,
one.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening.
Have a good night.